Apocalyptic Black Technology System. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 90. Preemptive. With the divergence of dark energy perception, the feeling of controlling the whole world emerged in Su-Ran's heart. The dust floating in the air, the broken and rolled debris of the cabin door, the small particles in the smoke drifting in with the flames. For a moment, Su-Ran even felt that he was the so-called god standing here. Everything in this small space seemed to be under his control. As long as he wanted to, he could turn the clouds upside down, but Su-Ran knew that this was an illusion. His dark energy perception is very strong, but there is no way to turn it into a real threat and force. Su-Ran could only control it simply. So at this moment, he was carrying dark energy to press down on the half-human, half-worm woman. The Yunchang has already begun to tilt, and its speed is gradually slowing down. Standing in the corridor of the Yunchang, you can also feel this tilt, but at this moment, the air in the corridor suddenly surges, and the airflow is swept by the dark energy. Underneath, gusts of whistling air currents were formed, sending out piercing howls, rushing towards the half-human, half-worm woman. But mixed in it, the real attack is the dark energy. In other words, this is not really an attack. Su-Ran, who struck first, succeeded. With this blow, he forcefully lifted the opponent up. That's right, just like the previous test in Xinjiang and the battle in Gaoli Giant, Su-Ran used dark energy to forcibly pull the opponent from the ground, and suspended him in mid-air. The four saber feet nailed into the ground on the back of the half-human, half-worm woman were all uprooted, and a little surprise finally flashed across its always cold face, and the light patches on both sides of the face flashed together. The bright light was unexpectedly a little cute. Su-Ran was slightly stunned for a moment, but immediately he shook his hand and smashed the opponent against the wall behind him. With a loud noise, half of its body sank into the steel, and the entire alloy wall was twisted and deformed. The power of the blow is great. After being slightly stunned, Su-Ran's heart was filled with anger, not to mention how many people in his Yunchang ship and how many soldiers he killed along the way. This monster alone means that no one knows how many innocent survivors died in the experiment. Although the life form of the swarm is very similar to that of human beings, it is almost completely different in terms of biological form. There is no possibility of an insect with a human face and body in the swarm. It lives in this half-human, half-insect form. Here, it is only possible that it is the product of biological experiments, and the information obtained from the spore life before is almost confirmed. The swarm has indeed been conducting dark energy biological experiments, capturing a large number of humans for experiments, and even carrying out mass cloning and replication. Su-Ran can imagine how human beings are like in that biological experiment without seeing it with his own eyes. The experimental subject, who was sent to the swarm like a guinea pig, finally fused with a certain worm to form such a half-human, half-insect, neither human nor ghost monster. This face, this body, should belong to a certain human being. However, according to the information provided by the spore life, the laboratory of the swarm is the number 03 mother nest instead of the central mother nest. If such a monster appears here, is it true that I made a mistake? The spore life was also put together by the swarm, and got the wrong information. Su-Ran let out a roar, and he strode forward, throwing his arm to one side, and the half-human, half-worm insect was thrown out immediately, and hit the other side of the wall with a bang. Its size and weight were much higher than the praying mantis-like bug that I encountered in Gaoli Giant before, so Su-Ran's load was not that heavy. But in the next moment, Su-Ran felt unprecedented resistance in the dimly lit aisle of the Yunchang. Su-Ran saw a slender arm of dim silver gray from the depths of the collapsed wall. The control power of the second dark energy bursts out in the field. Su-Ran only felt that the feeling of controlling the audience like a god suddenly weakened at this moment, and a second force surged up in the space to compete with him for the control of dark energy. Under the circumstances, Su-Ran even took a step back immediately, and the half-human, half-insect monster landed on the steel corridor again, with its legs as knives, dragging its body and rushing towards Su-Ran at high speed. Along the way, it stretched out its hands, and the entire corridor started squeezing and twisting up. Su-Ran took a deep breath, and simply pressed down on the ground with her back hand. With a loud noise, the entire corridor began to collapse section by section, and the aisle under the feet of the half-human, half-worm monster also collapsed, bringing its body all the way down, Falling to the next floor in the Yuncheng, there was also cold sweat on Su Ran's fort. He has always used rifles and cannons, and rarely uses dark energy to scramble with the opponent. He is not experienced enough, and he does not have enough control over dark energy. However, he was taking out a bunch of tactical grenades and firearms from the watch space, ready to greet him like the third one at the same time. The location of the number 3 escape cabin of the Yuncheng. It is located at the angle between the bridge and the shield system, in the front half of the Yuncheng, and it is barely the safest place in the entire Yuncheng. A large number of members of the ship were coming from various escape routes connecting here, and Yuan Licheng also sent many people to meet them and take care of the wounded. Although Yuan Licheng wants to retreat as soon as possible more than anyone else, he understands that these crew members are the wealth of the fleet. If the Yuncheng is gone, if these people are also buried with him, it will be a truly unbearable loss at this time. Tian Yushuang and others ran over from the front and brought Su Ran's words here. Many disgraced and panic-stricken people have complex expressions. Some people are excited, others are silent. Someone whispered, "Where is your excellency, commander? Is he alright?" Yuan Licheng shook his head. "Retreat, let's wait for another minute. After 1 minute, we will flee immediately. Everyone should make preparations first, and those who have not boarded the escape pod find their place as soon as possible." "Where is Li Yilin?" Yuan Licheng looked around and didn't see Adjutant Li in the overcrowded escape boat, so he walked out the door and saw Li Yilin standing at the porthole for some reason. Looking out, Yuan Licheng was slightly taken aback, and immediately walked over and said, "Li Yilin, hurry up, board the ship." "What are you doing?" Li Yilin shook her head. She pointed to the Fugalo outside the window that was running alongside the Yuncheng, and said, "Did you find out? It stopped firing at us." "What?" Yuan Licheng looked out, and sure enough, he saw that the Fugalo stopped bombarding the Yuncheng, but the Yuncheng was already on the verge of destruction, and the control layer of the bridge had already begun to retreat. No one even noticed. Yuan Licheng's expression changed, and he said, "Why didn't it fire anymore? Since when did it cease fire?" Chapter 91. Melee combat. The lower deck has been engulfed in flames. Su Ran stepped on the twisted and deformed metal corridor to the edge of the broken corridor and looked down. What he saw was such a sea of flames. This is the secondary trunk passage leading to the bridge. Below this passage is a circular corridor passage, which connects several important facilities on the second deck, and below it is the secondary restaurant lounge in the fleet. Now both layers have been opened up, turning into a piece of flame ruins, and looking down from this position, you can see that in the sea of flames below, on a crimson metal platform, the half-human, half-worm monster is standing up straight, raising its head, and a pair of icy linear pupils are looking upwards. Fangs Su Ran immediately responded with a grenade. The grenade he threw at this moment is not an ordinary grenade. Its scientific name is the Gravity Field Control Bomb. It can build a bomb 10 times the size of the base with a radius of 15 meters in the explosion area within 2 seconds. The high-gravity environment with dynamic gravity is a restricted weapon. A gravitational field control bomb hadn't landed yet, but Su Ran had thrown out dozens of grenades like potatoes, high explosive, fragmented, flashing, poisonous. As a commander who is quite afraid of death, although Su Ran has always lived high on the bridge, his own defense and weaponry are still intact. In an instant, all kinds of explosions and flashes engulfed the half-human, half-worm monster, and even its shadow was invisible. Su Ran was still unambiguous, and he took out a heavy-duty laser cannon that he had tailor-made before. Ordinary strength-type awakened people don't even think about using this thing, but at this moment, Su Ran resisted it on his shoulders, and before his hand thunderstorm fell, he connected to the outside the energy box installed. Facing the bottom is a rumbling burst of fire. Lasers flew one after another, shooting out from the muzzle of Su Ran's side, and falling into the explosion and poisonous fog below. It took about a minute for Su Ran to use up the functions in the energy box and shoot out at least 1,000 laser rays. The surrounding ground was pierced by Su Ran, and the smoke and dust billowed up when Su Ran put down the heavy cannon on his shoulder. He felt a burning pain in his shoulder. However, he didn't dare to be careless, and immediately lowered his head and looked down. Then Su Ran changed color. At this moment, he saw that the entire sea of flames below was shaking. Amidst the sea of flames and the lingering smoke, there was a high-pitched and mournful whistling sound. It didn't sound like a human being's voice, and it was extremely penetrating. At almost the same moment, the Fugalo, which was driving alongside the leaning Yuncheng but hadn't fired for a long time, seemed to have received some order suddenly. The Yuncheng, which was close at hand and had no power to fight back, delivered a fatal blow. The entire Yuncheng was shaking violently, and at this moment, Yuan Licheng and the others were leaving the main body of the Yunchang from the number 3 escape cabin, and flew obliquely into the far sky, leaving the range of firefights between the Yunchang and Fugalo, and so far, almost all the living people on the Yunchang have been evacuated. And the scoured warship will drive under the final automatic navigation level until the moment it completely falls in order to cope with the worst possibility. Li Yilan's final route for Yunchang was to fly to America, away from the position of the fleet that was at war with the brood of the Swarm Wars for what is not the depths of the Pacific Ocean but the direction of the Americas. I am afraid that only Li Yilan can know. At the same moment, Su Ran's body shook slightly due to the sudden violent vibration, but at this moment, he was obviously not concerned about this kind of thing because the damn monster is not dead yet, having been in contact with dark energy for so long. It was the first time that Su Ran felt that dark energy was simply unscientific, even a little fantasy. Most of the dark energy awakeners he came into contact with before were in the conventional cognition of human beings. Maybe some people's abilities were exaggerated, but they were not exaggerated to such an extent under Su Ran's gaze. The sea of fire below was drawn up by that monster. That half-human, half-insect monster collided with this raging flame from bottom to top, and everything along the way was torn apart by its surging dark energy. Su Ran wanted to evade, but found that he couldn't dodge at all, so he could only watch the other party like a black lightning, wrapped in a sea of red, and countless broken hull structures, from bottom to bottom, and bump into the second-level main road to the bridge where he was. There was an earth-shattering bang, and the whole world was turned upside down. Fortunately, Su Ran was not unprepared. He immediately controlled the dark energy and hedged against the opponent, which alleviated the bombardment to a certain extent. But at this moment, this area of the battleship was almost completely penetrated, and it fell after taking off among the flames and debris all over the sky. Su Ran saw that black shadow flying towards Su Ran like a flash of lightning. A knife foot directly cut through a huge metal plate blocking them, and fell in front of Su Ran. Su Ran is really not afraid of melee combat, not to mention the strengthening of the dark energy armor on his body, although his 15,000 dark energy potion did not allow him to truly master this mysterious magical power. It greatly improved his physical fitness and various skills. Otherwise, could he carry the airborne laser cannon and shoot like an ordinary rifle? It was too late to say it, but then it was too late. Facing the knife foot that fell from the surprise attack, Su Ran directly raised his hand and held it up abruptly. With a backhand pull, he directly pulled the opponent towards him, and punched the opponent like steel. Come out, directly bombard the opponent's belly. Su Ran's eyes turned red slightly. It was the splash of blood falling into his eyes at such a distance. Su Ran could see clearly that his tactics of adding grenades and cannons just now were not unsuccessful. The monster's body was also covered with scars, blood flowed horizontally, and the right shoulder was even blown to pieces, revealing a white forest bone stubble. Her blood is also blood red, similar to that of humans, and it is not corrosive. However, the opponent's face was extremely ferocious, his eyes were red, and he opened his mouth, revealing 2 rows of sharp fangs. Immediately afterwards, an incomparable invisible force erupted in the field. And Su Ran felt as if he had been hit hard, and his body was blasted away like a cannonball. Su Ran also let out a roar that shook the sky. He can't use dark energy, but he can't lose to anyone in this foolish duel. $50,000 have been spent, so it's not waste. The second surge of dark energy rushed out in an instant. Chapter 92 Falling. Boom, boom. Attracted by the loud noise, Li Yilan looked back through the round porthole of the escape cabin, and a vertical and horizontal bright line of fire was reflected in her pupils at that moment. Just now, a line of fire lit up in the center of the Yuncheng, running vertically and horizontally through the entire battleship. It was the power room and energy room that exploded. The flagship of the fleet, a 2,000-meter-long behemoth, exploded, disintegrated majestically in midair, and shattered into fragments. Like a biscuit being crushed, it exploded from the sky amidst earth-shattering noises. Perished to the sea below. The flagship of the Xinjiang fleet, Yuncheng, has since crashed here in the escape cabin. Someone whispered, "The Yuncheng is gone." In the sky, the explosion attracted almost everyone's attention. Lin Yuandong stared down from his own bridge, silent, and Qiao Xianchen sternly said, "Open fire, order the fleet, the war brood in front of the target, we want to kill it." The high-altitude spore life, Fugalo, remained motionless, and seemed to have no reaction to this. Not too far away from here is the American Empire State of Hawaii. The Honolulu Command Center. The news arrived here almost immediately. It has been confirmed that the fleet's largest flagship has just been destroyed. Hearing these words, the local commander fell back to his seat with mixed feelings in his heart. and remained silent for a while, not knowing what to say. At this moment, Su Ran was falling before the explosion of the Yuncheng. He was no longer on that battleship. The collision of the two dark energies tore apart the hull structure, and the powerful dark energy counterattack destroyed the already fragmented battleship deck around the two of them, and they tumbled and flew out all the way in at this time. The Yuncheng was martyred grandly. It exploded just above Su Ran's head. Su Ran only felt a bang in his head, and he didn't even know whether he was hit by the bomb or was shocked by the loud noise. He only felt that his ears were bleeding, and there was a sharp pain in his head, and his consciousness was blurred, and he couldn't hear any sound, but he still knows that he is falling, and there is still an opponent that has not been resolved in Su Ran's muddled and confused mind. Even a ridiculous and secondary thought flashed through: if you dare to touch my battleship, I will kill it. And that half-human, half-worm monster had almost the same thoughts as Su Ran. Although it had a half-human body, its biological strength was far higher than that of human. Su Ran would be dizzy from the shock, and the deafness in both ears actually depends on the physique of the awakened person. If it was an ordinary person, he might die on the spot. However, the monster was hardly affected. The pretty woman showed a ferocious look on her face, and rushed towards Su Ran. It seems to confirm that Su Ran is the commander of the battleship. At this time, there is no difference between the mood of wanting to kill Su Ran and the mood of Su Ran wanting to kill it in the fall. The two started the second round of competition in this sea of fire and a lot of wreckage. Su Ran's state is extremely poor, and he doesn't know how to use dark energy, so he was at an absolute disadvantage when he came up, and was almost beaten by the opponent. If he didn't have dark energy to protect himself, he might have died on the spot. It was squeezed and crushed into a ball of plasma by the opponent with dark energy. The half-human, half-worm monster wrapped the surrounding debris with dark energy, and threw it at Su Ran like money. The largest of them was actually a section of the main laser gun of Yuncheng, which was more than 30 meters long, and it fell on Su Ran's body. The dark energy battle armor on his body was cracked, and the skin was opened in small and fine openings, and blood flowed out from it, soaking his clothes. Su Ran's condition is getting worse and worse, and her mind is becoming more and more unclear. He even felt that he had returned to before his rebirth. At that time, the survivor base he was in was dug through by the swarm, and he fell all the way, watching those familiar faces disappear into the darkness one by one. No, I can't die like this. I still have Lin Yuandong, Qiao Xiangjin, Tong Maya Okyu, Li Yilin, and so many people in the fleet waiting for me to go back. I can't die here. Su Ran's chaotic mind finally regained a gleam of clarity. He raised his head slightly, looked at the half-human, half-worm monster in Yuan Kong, and let out a roar. It must be killed. It must be killed, or I will die. Must I? How can I kill it? The pain in his brain was severe, as if someone was poking around with a needle in his head. It took Su Ran about 5 seconds to come up with a tactic that should have come to mind immediately. Approaching the past, from the fight just now, it can be seen that my dark energy is only slightly weaker than it, but because I only have perception and cannot use it, I can't beat it. But my physical strength is comparable to that of the opponent. Just be careful to avoid its knife feet. Right, that's it. If you fight against dark energy, you will die melee. I still have a chance. Closing in, hand to hand, dodging its blade. These 3 sentences became the last thoughts in Su Ran's mind. He took out 2 tactical daggers from the wristwatch space, manipulated his body with dark energy, circled while falling, and marched on the flames in the air. Finally, it approached little by little, and bumped into the half-human, half-worm monster. The monster's condition was not as good as it looked. When Su Ran's hand touched it, it was full of blood. It was also at the end of its strength. As soon as Su Ran bullied him, he felt a huge pulling force. It was the half-human, half-worm monster trying to use dark energy to throw Su Ran away from his body. But at this moment, Su Ran's mind was already in a state of semi-shutdown, and he only remembered those few things, and even kept repeating approaching the past, hand-to-hand combat, avoiding its knife feet. At this time, he was finally approaching, and there was no reason for him to let go. He lost the 2 tactical daggers at some point, so he simply wrapped his arms around the opponent's slender waist, kicked his feet wildly, and then it's the hammer. The 2 of them wrestled together in mid-air like this. No matter how the other party fought back, Su Ran would not dodge. He would only evade when the other party's swords and feet were slashing at him. Close to the past, hand-to-hand combat, avoid its blade feet. Close to the past, hand-to-hand combat, avoid its blade feet. Melee combat, the knife foot, tore its knife foot, a knife foot cut down from top to bottom. Su Ran reached out with both hands, grabbed it firmly, stared at the opponent's back with both feet, and under the blessing of dark energy, he pulled it hard, and blood gushed wildly. The woman wailed in pain, and the two of them tussled and fell all the way, followed by countless pieces of the wreckage of the Yuncheng, and fell into the sea as the huge main body fragments of the Yuncheng fell into the seawater. The vortex surged up, engulfing the two of them in the blink of an eye. Chapter 93 The Moment of Victory. Chapter 93 The Moment of Victory. 10 minutes ago in Kyoto, the capital of Asia, the first important person received the latest news from, except for some skybrood clusters and individual Fugalo warships, most of the swarms are stopping their original actions, no longer attacking and moving, and have entered a defensive state. The encirclement of the huge insect swarm moving towards the Pacific Ocean has almost collapsed, and most of the war insects have stopped advancing, no longer responding to the call of the Pacific Inner Circle. Looking at this information, how could he not understand what happened? The first important officer let out a long breath, sat back on his armchair, looked around at the subordinates and important officials who were nervously watching him, and finally smiled slowly, saying, "The new era requires its coming." At this moment, few people realize what this sentence means, and such news is spreading all over the world. Few people know what the battle situation in the Pacific Ocean is like. But the swarms of insects have already spread all over this blue planet, and they suddenly stopped moving and began to retreat for defense, which can explain everything. Some people may not understand what happened, but soon, the news will spread to every corner of this planet, and at the same moment, this very moment, the direction of the new capital, as early as when the fleet began to move to the core area of the Pacific Ocean and pointed at the core central hive, the large swarm of insects besieging Xinjiang City had receded like a tide, and even re-exited from the scope of Xinjiang's special zone. During this period of time, the turbo laser cannon had cooled down. But there was no battle report from the front line. Li Ji and a group of soldiers gathered in the command center, waiting for news from the front line. It stands to reason that if the battle of the fleet is over, they should contact the Xinjiang special zone as soon as possible. They may not contact the military or the government, but they should definitely contact the fleet logistics headquarters to prepare for the return and maintenance of the fleet. However, there has been no news for a long time, and the time is now almost 10 o'clock. The time it took for the fleet to enter the Pacific Ocean has even exceeded the total time of the previous Kyushu Island War and Space War, but there is still no news. However, news from the headquarters in Kyoto came. They informed the Xinjiang Special Zone of the situation in China and the preliminary judgment of the Kyoto Command Center. The fleet is likely to have won. When this news was relayed from Li Ji's mouth, the entire military command center erupted into cheers that shook the sky. No one, District 8 www.debaquixsw.top, thought that the situation would change in such a way. This battle turned the world situation around. Yan Hulong couldn't help but said, "In one night, space, Kyushu Island, and the Pacific Ocean, 3 places, thousands of miles of raids, victorious in hundreds of battles. It is indeed our Xinjiang fleet. It is indeed our Xinjiang fleet." He hung on the side couldn't hide his excitement. At this moment, both of them seemed to have completely forgotten that they were the ones who tried their best to prevent the fleet from going to battle before, thinking that Su Ran and the swarm were already working together. In the final analysis, they are not bad people. And they are resisting so much for the sake of China and their country. The Xinjiang command center was filled with jubilation. Everyone understands what this battle means. The 6-month-old swarm apocalypse will usher in a huge turning point on this day. Li Ji directly called Zhang Jiangul, who was guarding the fleet headquarters, but there was still no news from the fleet, so Li Ji said, "Hurry up and prepare, their fleet is probably coming back soon." At the same time, the Pacific battlefield, no one in the fleet got excited. The fall of the Yuncheng was engraved in everyone's eyes. Lin Yuandong and other fleet members came over for 2 minutes to get the exact news. They learned that before the crash of the Yuncheng, Su Ran did not leave the battleship, and now it is very likely that he fell with the Yuncheng. Of course, falling together is the best situation. The main body of the Yuncheng has been disintegrated in the martyrdom, and the steel and iron bones of the Yuncheng have been broken. What will happen to the flesh and blood of the commander? Everyone's heart is extremely heavy, and every battleship is surprisingly silent. However, the battle was drawing to a close in the front direction of the fleet. The last war brood is also burning and falling into the sea below. So far, 3 war hives, including 1 central hive, have been destroyed in the sea area. The fog created by the swarm has long since dissipated. The stars and the moon are bright. Looking down from the sky where the battleship is located, flames are floating in the sea area, and there are floating wrecks for hundreds of nautical miles, floating and sinking with the tide of the waves, like huge pieces of duckweed. Revealing the afterglow of destruction, the swarm Fugalo battleship disappeared at some point, and it might have taken advantage of the chaos to escape. The Fugalo controlled by the spore life was still up and down in the sky. After the battle, it raised its altitude even higher, and only sent a message, which went straight to Lin Yuandong's frigate. Congratulations, our cooperation is very pleasant. Looking at this message, Lin Yuandong wished he could shoot them a missile. If the spore life could give them a little more force just now, maybe the situation would not have come to this point. The Yuncheng did not need to fall, and Su Ran also, even though Lin Yuandong knew that spore life had no obligation to care about the life and death of the fleet. He still couldn't control his anger at this moment, but Lin Yuandong still retains his reason. The fleet suffered heavy losses, and now it is impossible to turn against the spore life. He forwarded this message to Qiao Xiangjun, saying, "Old Qiao, you can make false claims with him. I will go down to pick up Yuan Lichen's escape boat, and our Fallen ship. I'll go and fish them out, and then organize the manpower to search for your excellency." Commander Lin Yuandong's voice was very dull. He looked at the invincible ship all over the sky and the wreckage in the ocean. It was a big victory, but for some reason, he couldn't really be happy. Qiao Xiangjun nodded, and just said, be careful that these bugs are dead but not stiff. If you find something abnormal, report it to me immediately." Afterwards, Qiao Xiangjun cut off the communication and started communicating with the spore life. Now is the weakest time for the fleet. Apart from the frigate and the Awakener, there are only 3 destroyers left, each of which is billowing thick smoke, burning open flames, and full of scars. At this time, it is absolutely impossible to turn against the spore life. The Apocalypse lifted off slowly, while the frigate began to descend. It first recovered the escape boat where Yuan Lichen and the others were located, and then continued down to search for the survivors in the fallen destroyer. The location of the Yuncheng was too far away. "I'm afraid we have to wait a while." Chapter 94 Search. After negotiating briefly with Qiao Xiangjun, Fugalo, controlled by the spore life, left immediately. Looking at the course, they did not turn back to the Xinjiang Special Zone. Qiao Xiangjun actually wanted to ask where they were going, but it was a pity that the spore life had an attitude when facing Su Ran before. It was so talkative that he wanted to talk all day, but now he immediately changed to Su Ran. The other attitude was that he didn't negotiate too much with Qiao Xiangjun at all. He just said a few words, and then he drove the swarm's battleship Fugalo and quickly disappeared into the night sky. Qiao Xiangjun is not a fool, of course he can see it. It's because Su Ran is gone. The spore life seems to believe that Su Ran is dead, or the probability of death is extremely high, so there is no need to be vigilant and polite. After the battle here, they leave quickly, and there is no need to negotiate too much with the fleet. After all, it was Su Ran who made spore life choose to join forces with the fleet, and it was Su Ran, an unknown alien, who made spore life wary. Now that the Yuncheng has crashed and Su Ran is gone, of course the spore life will no longer be here to accompany it, let alone humble itself. It is already a great deal of face to be able to maintain a peaceful state. Of course, Qiao Xiangjun felt that he had reason to doubt that this so-called face was because the spore life hadn't confirmed whether Su Ran had really died with the Yuncheng ship that was martyred, or in other words, it hadn't been completely confirmed, so everything was left on the line. Nothing about the fleet. Qiao Xiangjun could see these things clearly, but he felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. He realized that today's battle might be the end, but it didn't mean the end of the disaster. The Earth has not yet ushered in the dawn. The apocalypse in the sky was turning around slowly, lowering its height. Qiao Xiangjun looked at the deep Pacific Ocean below, and said in his heart, "Su Ran, don't die." Down below, Lin Yuandong's frigate had sailed far away, searching for the wreckage of the Yuncheng. In the last period of time, the Yuncheng sailed out in a straight line, and the location where it crashed was 50 or 60 kilometers away from the location of the initial firefight. However, at this time, the wreckage of the fallen wreckage of the war brood had also merged with the wreckage of the Yuncheng, floating quietly in the sea water. They have all disappeared, and there is no sound in the sea except for the undercurrent of the sea. Li Yilan had already arrived at the bridge of the frigate, and was closely observing the scan results of the vital signs. However, no living things were found. There was a dead silence on the bridge of the frigate. Only Li Yilan put her hand on the operator's shoulder. Her eyes were red, and she said in a loud voice, "Continue to search. He won't die. He won't die." On the other side, Lin Yuandong was sitting on his captain's seat, and he hadn't spoken for a long time. Yuan Lichen hadn't come over, and he was still counting the number of people in the rear cabin of the frigate. Fortunately, many destroyers fell, but there were still the survivor, who survived by luck. Although his destroyer fell, he did not receive a fatal blow. When it fell into the sea, the main body was still intact. Most of the crew survived and were picked up by the frigate just now after boarding the frigate. Who was a little embarrassed, was still quite excited. He hugged this and that, and even gave Yuan Licheng a bear hug. Asked, "What's the matter? Didn't we win?" "We won. These damned bugs were beaten up by our fleet and sent to my nest. Why are you all like this?" "Commander Watt. Is he on the bridge?" Yuan Licheng shook his head. Su ran. He went down with the Yunchang at this moment. The smile on whose face also froze. The frigate has patrolled the sky for the 5th time, but still hasn't found anything. Li Yilan gritted her teeth. "We should expand the scope of our search. It's time for us to return." At this time, Lin Yuandong, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. He glanced at Qiao Xianzhen's ship in the sky, which was descending. He stood up slowly, walked from the captain's seat to Li Yilan's side, and took a picture. He patted her on the shoulder and said in a low voice, "We're out of fuel, and there are still so many wounded. It's time to return." Li Yilan, who has always been gentle, lowered her head slightly. "Su Ran hasn't been found yet. How can we leave? If you don't leave, our fleet may not be able to return smoothly. We have to find him. In case it is somewhere. Today we are leaving." Lin Yuandong shook his head. "It's okay. You don't know who Su Ran is. There are so many evil things. He still has storage space in his hand, and he is still an awakened person. Maybe he has already sat down at this time. Some little submarine chugs away, but we're headed back." Li Yilan raised her head slightly, reading leisurely. "Is that possible?" These words made Lin Yuandong slightly silent. Of course he knew that what he said was impossible. The fleet is here. How could Su Ran leave by herself? No news, no contact, no results after 5 times of searching. Although Lin Yuandong didn't want to admit the results of these kinds of results, he had to admit that things were probably heading for the worst. Lin Yuandong opened his mouth, and sighed for a long time before saying, "Let's go, Yilan. The fleet can't follow here. What if he suddenly returns in his small submarine and finds that our fleet has sunk in the Pacific Ocean? Then what will happen? He won't dismiss us." Li Yilan stared at him blankly for a while, but didn't say anything, but walked back silently, found a random place in the corner and sat down. Lin Yuandong stared at her in a daze for a long time before giving the order to return. The frigate, circling at low altitude, slowly raised its altitude, and several broken warships converged in the sky, began to accelerate a little bit, and sped away towards Asia, and soon turned into a few inconspicuous small dots at the far end of the night sky. Lin Yuandong sat on his captain's seat, glanced to the left and then to the right. 12 destroyers, 2 enlightenment ships, 1 frigate, 2 bombers, 1 cloud city. Hundreds of fighter jets and drones. There are only 4 sailing in the sky now. Lin Yuandong took out a cigarette butt from a corner, lit it in violation of the fleet's regulations, and smoked it. The smoke curled up, covering half of his face. His face was so calm but where no one noticed. Lin Yuandong's hand holding the cigarette trembled slightly. Chapter 95 Embers. The fleet did not return to Kyushu Island to pick up Tongmaya Okyu's 2 warships, but returned all the way back to Xinjiang Special Zone. Their fuel is insufficient, the wounded are too far away, and the battleship is full of scars. After all, they can't take care of everything. However, Lin Yuandong contacted Tongmaya Okyu as soon as possible, explained the situation to her briefly, and made sure that there was no need for help there, and they returned directly. Hearing that the fleet had won, Tongmaya Okyu was also a little excited, and asked, "Where is your excellency, commander? Haven't their communication devices been repaired yet?" Lin Yuandong shook his head, nodded again, seeing the excited expression on Tongmaya Okyu's face. He didn't know how to speak for a while, and Tongmaya Okyu is also a smart person. Seeing Lin Yuandong's expression, she realized something. The smile on her face faded, and she said, "Where's the commander? Where's the Yuncheng? Logically speaking, it shouldn't be the Victory. Commander, will you inform us? Is something wrong?" Lin Yuandong smiled stiffly, and said, "The Yuncheng was destroyed. At present, Your Excellency, commander is missing and has not been found yet." Tongmaya Okyu gasped. She was silent for about half a minute, but the subsequent reaction was beyond Lin Yuandong's expected calmness. She just nodded slightly and said, "I understand. Now there are Dongying people here to help us. It won't take long to repair the battleship, and we will return to the Xinjiang Special Zone. You can rest assured." Here Lin Yuandong nodded and took the initiative to interrupt the communication. The fleet sailed in the air for a while, and finally arrived at the fleet headquarters outside Xinjiang. Zhang had already prepared a large number of fleet logistics personnel and medical personnel, and waited for the 4 warships to fall from the sky, then led people to meet them, and brought a large number of crew members down on top of these 4 warships. The injured were immediately sent to the medical center at headquarters. Zhang Jianguo rubbed his hands and was also very excited. Seeing Li Yilin, he said, "It's not easy. This time we won the fight. Isn't it that the bugs are about to die?" Li Yilin only forced a smile. On the other side, Yuan Lichen, Lin Yuanduang and others were facing another group of people. Those were people from the military and government who had been waiting here for a long time. Jin Xian stood on the first place, but was wearing a military overcoat. Seeing Yuan Lichen and the others approaching, he reached out his hand, shook hands with him, and said, "Thank you for this battle of the fleet, and thank you for your dedication to this battle. If someone told me before that a group of people, most of whom were born among ordinary people, defeated the swarm that threatened the world, I might still not believe it, but today, the Xinjiang fleet traveled tens of thousands of kilometers to wash the swarm with blood. I don't look directly at your illustrious victories. On behalf of the military, government, and survivors across the country, I would like to thank the Xinjiang fleet for their efforts and sacrifices." Yuan Lichen nodded, and said, "Okay. Thank you, Minister Jin, and Major General Li and everyone, but the fleet is exhausted today and suffered heavy losses." "I'm afraid." Jin Xian understood Yuan Lichen's meaning. He smiled slightly, and said, "We understand that we are only here to clean up the dust for the fleet. If the fleet has any needs, you can just ask, and I, Xinjiang Cheng and Huaxia, will fully support it. Thank you." After saying thanks, everyone in the fleet headed by Yuan Li turned their heads and walked towards the headquarters building. Behind them, a large number of maintenance personnel and robots are boarding the ship to rush to repair the 4 returned warships. Qiao Xiangjin was the last one to step forward. He glanced at the high-ranking officials in the new capital in front of him, and said in a serious tone, "Everyone, go back." Yan Hulong took a slight step forward, as if he wanted to say something, but was pushed back by Li Ji, and the people on this side started to walk backwards. Only Jin Xian, who was wearing a military coat, did not move, and when most of them walked away, he asked, "Xiang Chen, where's Su Ran?" Qiao Xiangjin shook his head. Jin Xian sighed and said, "That Adjutant Chuan is a smart man. Do you understand what he is wary of?" Qiao Xiangjin pursed his lips, remained silent for a moment, and said, 12 destroyers, 2 Apocalypse, 1 frigate, 2 bombers, 1 Yuncheng, 18 warships. I still remember our fleet's regular schedule. What kind of situation is that? But now only 4 ships have come back. Even if you add the 2 ships that were forced to land in Dongpu, there are only 6 ships. The entire fleet has nearly 3,000 people, and now it is less than 1,000. This victory, the fleet filled it out with their lives. Please give the fleet some time. Please give the dead a little bit of respect. Don't worry, I'm standing here to give you a chance to buffer. Jin Xian looked at the numerous bullet marks on the battleship in the distance, and said, "However, the weather is about to change, and you should prepare as soon as possible." At the same moment, the Pacific battlefield, the war is over, but the wreckage on the sea is still not clear at this moment. The sea water suddenly surged, and there were waves of water. If you observe carefully, you can see that there are a large number of sea monsters in the shape of deep divers in the sea area below the sea level. Cruising seems to be looking for something, and on the surface of the sea, a swarm battle armor, Fugallo, is also cautiously revealing his figure, patrolling back and forth in the sea area. In this way, the search lasted for nearly 3 hours, and the swarm still didn't seem to have gained anything at this time. Fugallo sent out a series of messages, which flew to the far end of the earth. If translated, it would probably be, "This is the number 3212 insect swarm battleship. Our ship failed to find the queen. It has been confirmed that the queen has disappeared. All sequences 1 to 20 have been killed, and the neural network center has been completely destroyed. Repeat, the queen has disappeared. Sequences 1 to 210 have all been killed. The neural network center has been completely destroyed, and our ship proposes to launch the second Holy Flame plan." After a long time, only sporadic responses came. Apart from indifference, there was a rare gleam of desolation. "This is Skybrood number 1536. We have stopped moving forward and are willing to cooperate with the search for the Queen. The Queen has not been logged out in the main system and should still be alive. This is the number 03 experimental brood. The sacrifices of you and Her Majesty the Queen have not been in vain. We have successfully moved to a safe area. the fire of the swarm will not be extinguished. Our human dark energy research has made a breakthrough, but the progress of the experiment is only 70% of the actual progress, and there is a high possibility that unpredictable situations may occur. Please find the Queen as soon as possible. The Queen is actively serving as bait for us. If necessary, we are willing to provide any form of help. This is Skybrood Nest number 1775. We have stopped advancing. We came too late, and we were defeated again. Could it be that the universe is so big that there is no place for us? This is the number 562 swarm battleship. We have stopped advancing and are willing to cooperate with the search for the Queen at any time. However, our ship seconded the proposal. Start the second Holy Fire plan and establish a new emergency command system as soon as possible. Moreover, I disagree with the remarks made by the 1775 Skybrood. That fleet suffered heavy losses. This is our opportunity. Our ship suggests quickly reorganizing our forces. The first priority is to search for Her Majesty the Queen, and the second priority is to annihilate the remnants of that fleet. Our ship is the closest and will be the first to start the early stage investigate. Act freely. This is the nest of the second Holy Flame sequence of number 1536. In view of the fact that the current control system is paralyzed and the Queen with the highest level of authority and genetic blood is missing, in the future, our local hive will definitely suffer a devastating blow from humans. This planet it's no longer a place to stay. I suggest finding the Queen and leaving this planet. This is the number 03 experimental brood. We agree with the proposal of number 562 swarm battleship. We will take this opportunity to annihilate that fleet and cause permanent trouble. Silence, silence. After a long time, another message came back. This is the Gate 13 worm nest. We think. Silence, silence. Over the Pacific battlefield, the Fugalo numbered 3212 has not stopped searching. P.S. After writing this paragraph, it suddenly occurred to me that this seems to be a good place for me to finish the book. Haha, just kidding. After all, there is still everyone's support. It's over. I hope everyone can continue to support. Chapter 1 Long Dream. Suran had a dream. It was an extremely long dream. He's back to the beginning of the end times. The swarms of insects descended from the sky, the earth howled, the whole world trembled, and countless humans fled miserably. He was also among the fleeing crowd, just kept running, kept running. The sky seemed to be always dark, so gloomy and depressing, with no stars and no moon, only a little scarlet. It looked extraordinarily bleak. However, at some point, the human survivors running with him disappeared, as did the bugs chasing him. He stood on the empty street of Bingchen, looking around blankly. Tall buildings stood tall, like giants standing in the shadows, looking down at him indifferently. But at this moment, Suran suddenly heard a loud rumbling noise from the sky. The sound was so loud that it seemed to pierce a person's eardrum. Then, he saw a gap in the sky, a gap that shone like a rainbow in the reddish-black sky, as if space had been cut apart. Immediately afterwards, from inside, an overwhelming number of warships flew out. Some of them have strange shapes and have never been seen before, and they don't even know how they flew into the sky. Densely packed, tens of thousands, some big and some small, all flew out from the gap in the sky, scrambling to be the first, like exploding fireworks, as if filling the entire sky at once. A large battleship may even look as big as a star, but a small one may not be as big as a tricycle. Suran was at a loss. How could the Earth accommodate such a large warship? Why can I have a panoramic view? But among the thousands of battleships, some of them are familiar to Suran. Cloud City. He saw the Cloud City. There are more than one Yuncheng, guarding a palace-like battleship as huge as Jupiter. There are many guns on it, and the Yuncheng is beside it, like a small ship. Besides, there are also many spaceships that Suranjian has never seen before, but they maintain the same construction style as the Yuncheng, guarding the palace-like giant ship, like a planetary fleet. This fleet was the last one to leave that opening, and when it flew out, it threw a ball that flashed past and hit the opening in the space behind. In an instant, annihilation was created, and a black hole was born instantly. Some small battleships around could not avoid it, and were even pulled into it immediately. However, only at the next moment, there was a shrill piercing sound, and from the black hole, a streamlined battleship that was as black as lightning shot out from the black hole. It is so small, even inferior to a Wind Falcon attack aircraft, but it broke free from the pull of the black hole, and rushed towards the ocean-like fleet in the sky in front of it at high speed. At this moment, countless warships of different styles fled in the sky. The central deck of the palace-like giant ship in the center rose, revealing a group of 12 positron cannons, which fired instantly. The light reflected the whole world in a tragic way. And countless tiny warships flew around, fleeing like rats in a hurry. However, there was still a strange dislocation like visual perception. The lightning-like streamlined battleship directly passed a bombardment of the positron cannon, and crashed into the palace-like giant ship, piercing vertically and horizontally. Not knowing what happened inside, Su-Ran was stunned to see that giant Jupiter-like ship disintegrate in the air, and in the midst of the explosion, it turned into a group of newborn stars in the air like a star falling. Fire rained down from the sky. Su-Ran felt that his vision began to become blurred at this moment. He turned his head and ran away, trying to avoid a rain of destruction. Even if each piece of falling debris is as huge as a city, Su-Ran ran like this, and heard the earthquake tremble. The buildings collapsed, and the whole world was illuminated by tragic red, but none of the debris hit him. This road seemed to have no end, and it would never end. Su-Ran was tired, but panicked. At this moment, he suddenly remembered Cloud City. Fleet. Is his fleet still in the sky? What if it disappears like this? Su-Ran stood still and turned her head to look for it, but at this moment, the ground suddenly split open, and the huge crack spread all the way to Su-Ran's feet. With a scream, Su-Ran fell down. The surrounding scene became darker. The tragic picture of the sky became a slit, and it gradually became farther and farther away. I couldn't see more specific content, just a fiery red light, but the fall seemed endless. The darkness spread like a tide. Su-Ran waved his arms, trying to grab something to stabilize his body, but there was nothing. This darkness is like an abyss, and those who fall into it will always be in an endless fall. Su-Ran didn't panic, but for some reason, she suddenly remembered something Nietzsche said: those who fight monsters should be careful not to become monsters themselves. When you gaze into the abyss also gazes into you. He didn't know why he suddenly thought of such a sentence, but felt it was absurd and weird. And at this moment, the real feeling finally came. Su-Ran's body suddenly stopped. He fell into an ocean. This fall was so unexpected that Su-Ran felt that she had swallowed a large amount of seawater in an instant. He opened his mouth to cough it all out, but more water poured in. But he was dreaming, completely unaware that he was doing useless work. Just like that, he vomited while drinking, but he vomited faster than he drank, and he even vomited against the seawater. Yet he kept sinking, as if falling into a bottomless abyss. Maybe he's going to die like this at some point. He suddenly thought of his fleet again. On the Yuncheng, there was a silent bridge. Li Yilan's red eyes, Tian Yushuang's firm and triumphant smile. Absolutely can't die like this. Die at this time. How can it work? These two secondary school thoughts flashed through Su-Ran's mind, and Su-Ran struggled. He waved his hands desperately, and began to work hard to move upstream little by little, upstream. After going upstream for an unknown amount of time, Su-Ran's eyes finally lighted up. He swam out of the sea. When China is ushering in daylight, America is being shrouded in belated night. 70 kilometers away from San Diego, California, USA, on a certain beach, Su-Ran, who was washed up by the sea, suddenly opened her eyes. He spit out a big mouthful of water and coughed violently. He only felt his brain buzzing and felt extremely uncomfortable, but suddenly he felt as if he was holding something tightly in his hand. He turned his gaze blankly, and saw that he was holding a slender arm with dull silver-gray skin in his hand. Looking along this hand, the owner of the arm is lying beside him. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Hanging in the air. Fuck. Su-Ran was taken aback. Originally, he was still swollen with head and stomach, not so clear-headed, but now he was all clear-headed according to common sense. When most people wake up and see a woman lying next to them with very little clothes and a pretty good figure and appearance, most of them will have other associations. But at this time, Su-Ran's expression was terrified, as if he saw a monster, because the person lying next to him is not a good stubble. This is the Dark Energy Combat Unit of the Swarm, who almost took down the badly damaged Yuncheng by himself. Su-Ran is about to let go of her hand and step back for a distance, and shoot immediately, but Su-Ran pulled her hand. But she couldn't pull it successfully because he was holding someone's hand, but the other party was also holding his hand tightly. Both sides used great force. It was really not easy for Su-Ran to unilaterally pull out his hand, especially right now. Su-Ran is also in a very weak state. Su-Ran's head was still a little dazed, and he tried his best to twitch but couldn't pull out his hand, only to realize that the other party hadn't woken up. It's not dead. It's true that he hasn't woken up and is in a coma at this time. Su-Ran took another breath and calmed down. I didn't wake up. What about the alien? Not as good as my human body. After being dazed for a long time, Su-Ran shook her head at this moment, and came to her senses. It's fine if you don't wake up. This is simply a godsend. A good opportunity to kill it. With a flash of murderous intent in Su Ran's eyes, he took out a hunting gun from the space of his watch with his backhand. Because he was too close, he was afraid of blowing himself up, so he didn't dare to take out the equipment that was too ruthless. But a dark energy hunting gun should be enough. At such a short distance, the opponent is only relatively strong in dark energy, so he can definitely be killed. But be careful, it may be useless to start with a head alone. It is best to switch to the hand cannon mode and blow its body to pieces. Play it safe. What kind of hunk never looks back at the explosion? That's a stupid thing that people who have never died will do. However, Su Ran had just switched the dark energy hunting gun to the hand cannon mode, and before it hit his hand, he saw his dark energy hunting gun floating. At this moment, Su Ran was a little dazed, and wondered, I didn't use dark energy either. Then, he suddenly realized something, lowered his head a little stiffly, and looked at the woman in front of him. The other party didn't know when he opened his eyes, and a pair of black and white eyes looked at him blankly. The four eyes met, and the air seemed to freeze. Only the sea breeze blows from afar, rolling the woman's silver hair and flying in the air. The picture is quite beautiful. What a beautiful fart. Su Ran's face changed suddenly, and she realized that she might have pulled too hard a few times and woke up the other party. Seeing his dark energy hunting guns flying up, Su Ran belatedly remembered his dark energy. His eyes widened, his hands were slightly bluffed, and he looked like he was about to zoom in as a result. Soon Su Ran also flew up. His expression of magnifying the move has also changed into an expression of constipation without releasing the ultimate move. My dark energy doesn't work anymore. This was the only thought that flashed through Su Ran's mind afterwards. He was thrown out and landed on the beach a few meters away, eating a mouthful of sand. However, this strength was not great, but Su Ran realized that the opponent was obviously at the end of his battle, and his dark energy was exhausted. But at this time, the woman stood up unsteadily, but just standing up, she just groaned in pain, and fell to the ground as soon as her body went limp. It was only then that Su Ran noticed that the four saber legs behind the other party had all disappeared. Moreover, as the knife foot was uprooted, the magma-like rock plate armor that was both armor and protective layer on her body also fell off a lot, revealing a large area of silver gray skin on the back. And even the front also quite happy together. Su Ran frowned. He only vaguely remembered that this seemed to be his masterpiece. The other party seemed to notice Su Ran's gaze, and instinctively covered the important parts of his body. But soon, her expression became painful. Her injury was much more serious than Su Ran's, and she was relying solely on her strong biological advantages. If she was a human, she would have died long ago. This action was beyond Su Ran's expectations, but he didn't care about it at this time. The dead camel was bigger than a horse, and it was Su Ran's consistent style to kill it quickly and whip the corpse to death. Therefore, he took a glance and saw that the dark energy hunting gun had been thrown far away, so instead of picking it up, he simply took out another grenade from the space of his watch. Before on the Yuncheng, Su Ran almost wiped out his family fortune. This is his last stock. Afterwards, Su Ran stood on the deserted beach, and while quickly retreating to create a distance, he pulled the ring of the grenade and threw it towards the opponent. The woman let out an ah, raised her hand in a panic again, and knocked the grenade away with dark energy. The grenade flew obliquely towards the sea, and exploded on the sea surface, shining brightly. Seeing this, Su Ran took advantage of the situation and moved towards the dark energy hunting gun that fell on the ground on the other side. With the other hand, he took out the pistol directly from his waist. The weapons in his wristwatch space were basically gone, only some magazines, food and drink, and medical and biological supplies. During this process, Su Ran noticed that her leg seemed to be broken, and when she moved, she felt heart-piercing pain. But life and death are at stake, and the enemy is at hand. How can Su Ran control these things? A shuttle of pistols ran out of bullets, but they didn't touch the woman at all. On the contrary, every time Su Ran fired a shot, the woman over there screamed in surprise. Fortunately, taking this opportunity, although Su Ran walked slowly, she managed to arrive at the landing point of the dark energy hunting gun at that moment. He stretched out his hand, ready to pick up the gun, but, at this moment, Su Ran felt his body lighten. He flew up again. Su Ran looked at the dark energy hunting gun that was getting farther and farther away from him. This time, instead of being thrown away, he was pulled closer by the opponent. Su Ran suddenly felt a little funny. Sister, how come the dark energy skills I spent 15,000 resources on are not as useful as others? But when he got closer, Su Ran saw that the other party was sitting on the ground frowning. His face turned pale, looking at him, and asked, are you human too? The tone and ecology were very normal, which made Su Ran, who was hanging in midair, slightly stunned. Then he suddenly realized, her pupils became the same as normal humans. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 3 Enemy or Friend? Chapter 3, Enemy or Friend? Of course I'm human. Su-Ran pondered for a moment before answering. He didn't attack right away. First, he realized that something was wrong with this monster now. Second, he realized that even if he really made a move, there was a high probability that he would not be the opponent him. It's not a high probability, but it's true that you can't beat them when it's time to do it. You have to do it. The woman sat on the ground, still with obvious pain on her face, and said, "Then, why did you attack me?" With these words, Su-Ran's body lightened slightly, and was slowly put down by the other party. As soon as Su-Ran landed on the ground, he also sat on the ground. His legs really hurt like hell. Then Su-Ran said tentatively, "Do you know what you are?" What? To be honest, although Su-Ran had some guesses, he didn't know what the opponent's state was. Therefore, although he didn't plan to do anything for the time being, Su-Ran was still 120,000 points vigilant. This sentence made the other party slightly stunned. She seemed to understand what she was, glanced at her hands, stared at the dull silver gray skin for a long time, and said, "I see, you did the right thing. I am no longer is it human." Su-Ran looked at her gloomy expression. To be honest, she was really pretty and quite pitiful. Su-Ran asked, "Do you remember what happened before?" She shook her head, then nodded, and said, "I don't really remember. I just remember that I was caught by bugs, and the last impression was, they cut my body." A voice kept going. "My head says things I don't understand. I'm afraid, did something bad?" This is the main consciousness of the biological weapon made by the swarm has been revived. Su-Ran never thought about whether this might be some kind of high-level command unit of the swarm, because in this regard, his thoughts are very earth-oriented and one-sided. In the body? Changing bodies is often unacceptable to most people, but what he didn't consider is that for a biological race, it is quite normal to optimize individuals and change biological carriers. But for a swarm, the liberation of dark energy is a new evolution. Therefore, until now, Su-Ran has always thought that this guy is a biological weapon made by a swarm. Su-Ran reckoned that it might be because of the previous war, or her head getting flooded, or the paralysis of the command system of the swarm. The woman is no longer under the control of the swarm, and the consciousness that originally belonged to humans has not been wiped out. So at this moment her main consciousness came to life. This is definitely good news for myself after all. Judging from the current situation, he couldn't beat other. Su-Ran's thoughts were spinning here, but the woman sitting opposite him frowned slightly, and said, "Well, I probably understand that in such a situation, killing me is the most normal and reasonable choice, but can I beg you not to kill me? Although I can't guarantee how long my consciousness will be awake, but when I live as me, let me live? This request may be too much, but I also want to live, even if it becomes like this. I also want to live." The woman's voice was weak, but her desire for life was conveyed vividly. Su-Ran was silent in these words. She put herself in a very low profile, but at the moment, she is clearly in charge. Su-Ran shook her head. "Anyway, I can't beat you. Do whatever you want, and I'm not a bad person. You're a human being, so I won't kill you, but as you said, if your consciousness is gone, I will kill you. I'm afraid I won't be merciful. I understand." She nodded, showing a forced smile. "I probably also understand what the bugs have done with me. I just want to see more of this world. If I will threaten other people, that is my fault. I hope to see it. At that time, if you can kill me, I think I will be very happy. However, you seem to be just an ordinary person. You can rest assured that when I realize that something is wrong, I will be in my consciousness when you are awake. Let you kill me first. Am I just an ordinary person?" Su-Ran complained silently in his heart. In fact, his mood was a bit complicated at this time. He didn't know whether he was doing right or wrong. For the sake of the ruined Yuncheng and so many people who were killed and wounded in the battle, he should firmly kill this monster, but he couldn't refuse a human's desire for life. It was the monster who killed, not such a victim. She is just a poor awakener who has experienced the tragic experiment. Moreover, Su-Ran had other thoughts in his mind. If the other party didn't lie to me, and the human consciousness is really still there, then, do I have a chance to pull her to my side? After all, on the Yuncheng, Su-Ran has seen how terrifying her combat power is. If there is such a Superman in the fleet, of course, Su-Ran didn't believe everything she said, and had to observe and judge by herself. Okay. Su-ran said, then you can follow me for now. We'd better deal with the injury first. Su-ran looked around. He felt that he had been in a coma for a long time, but he didn't expect that it was still night, and now he was on land. It is estimated that this may be an unknown island, and it should be washed up by the sea. Su-ran shook his head. He glanced at his resource points, and there were only 2 points left. 2 points are almost useless. Su-ran glanced at the other party, and didn't obviously take out anything from the space of her watch. Instead, she reached into her bosom and pretended to take out a few special medicines and pain relievers produced by the system from her pocket. Yao casually asked, what's your name? My name is. She frowned, seemed to recall her own name for a while, and replied, Meng Yibai. Su-ran took another look at her, smiled, and said, my name is Su-ran. Where were you from before? Are you also from China? Were you an awakened person before? Meng Yibai nodded, shook his head again, and pressed his head in pain. I can't remember clearly. My memory is very chaotic. I just remember that I used to live in a seaside city. It was Huaxia, my parents. This may be the sequelae of the biological experiment. Su-ran replied, let's take some painkillers first. Chapter 4. Someone will come to pick me up. Chapter 4. Someone will come to pick me up. Meng Yibai took the painkiller and thanked him, but he seemed very sincerely grateful. Su-ran originally wanted to say you're welcome, I made you up, but she swallowed the words. After all, she was still an ordinary person in the eyes of others. How could she explain that she made others into this way? Moreover, saying something like I broke your 4 legs is somewhat inconsistent. Su-ran has been observing T-online novel www.23txt.xyz, the other party. Judging from her demeanor, she seems to be in a human state after the Battle of Spore Life. Jin Xian was particularly anxious to gather a group of experts in psychology, sociology and behavior to conduct special research and discussions. Su-ran was also fortunate to attend and learn a lot about the methods for identifying alien creatures. The most important point is that no matter how well alien creatures imitate human beings, they will expose loopholes that are completely different from human beings due to the difference in biological situation itself. The advanced level of alien creatures has reached the level of supercomputers, which can record and make all deliberate and inadvertent human behaviors in a strict manner. Therefore, while chatting, Su-ran has been observing. Now, he can really confirm that the awakening of the other party is indeed the main consciousness of human beings. It may be due to biological experiments that the brain is damaged, which leads to large-scale amnesia. Seeing the other party take the painkiller, Su-ran also had a preliminary judgment, and he was also unambiguous, and quickly began to deal with his injuries. At this time, Meng Yibai asked, can I ask why we appear here? Also, where's this? There was a battle. It seems that we fell into the sea together unluckily, and then we should have been washed ashore together. Su-ran replied, but now I don't know where it is. It may be is it some island? But I think someone will find it soon. Su-ran seemed full of confidence. He really needed to return to the fleet as soon as possible. The fleet suffered heavy losses. The spore life and human forces on the Earth might even become a threat to the fleet. Moreover, although the insect swarm was defeated, the high-level brood had the freedom to act. As long as they are not stupid, they will definitely launch a retaliatory attack on the fleet in the near future. Meng Yibai looked at the beach around him in a daze, thought for a while, then looked at Su-ran, who was full of confidence, and said, okay. Did I do your injury? You are a soldier. Su-ran was stunned for a moment, then looked down, and found that although his dark energy armor had been broken long ago, but the clothes inside were still fleet uniforms. Although the fleet's attire was different from that of the army, at first glance, it looked like a soldier in a special uniform. This time Su-ran nodded, almost. Meng Yibai frowned slightly, looking a little confused, obviously not quite understanding why these two questions of hers could be answered with similarities. Was it a soldier, or was it me who was injured? Don't you even know this? Meng Yibai tilted his head and thought for a while, then suddenly reached out and touched Su-ran's forehead. At this time, Su-ran was rolling up his pants and applying medicine to himself. Meng Yibei's action was like a ghost, and he didn't notice it. Su-ran was shocked when his smooth and cold hands touched him. It was confirmed that the other party seemed to have returned to the human state, so he didn't jump away immediately. Even so, Su-ran raised her head in astonishment and looked at Meng Yibai. Meng Yibai felt it for a while, then slightly widened his eyes. You have a fever. Su-ran also stretched out her hand and felt it. It was really hot. The temperature seems to be low to the touch. No wonder I was always dizzy. Su-ran also frowned. handed the medicine in his hand to the other party, and began to think about whether there was anything in his watch that could deal with fever. He remembered that at the 3rd level, he could manufacture that super powerful antipyretic. In the description of the system, it claimed to be able to treat the fever of all carbon-based organisms. The kind that can guarantee that people will not be fooled. And because of this overly powerful curative effect, this mere antipyretic drug needs 5 resource points in the system. But when it comes to medicines, Su-Ran is never ambiguous. Among the battleships, from the destroyer to the Yuncheng, he has prepared all the medicines. There is such a special and powerful antipyretic on the Yuncheng. However, Su-Ran was embarrassed to find that she didn't have any. Not carrying it is actually very simple, because he doesn't need it. After injecting 15,000 dark energy potions, Su-Ran's physical fitness has reached an unprecedented level. Not to mention sickness, even if there is a small cut on his body, even if he doesn't take the medicine, he will be cured within an hour at most. In this case, he didn't need such small corners of medicine. Instead, he stuffed a bunch of weapons, food and medicine for serious injuries in the watch space. And I looked at my resource points with only 2 points left. Su-Ran shook her head. It's okay, I'm in good shape, and I'll be fine in a while. These words made Meng Yibei's eyes widen, and he looked at Su-Ran in surprise. You are so hot, is this really okay? It's okay. Su-Ran thought in his heart, the fever may be due to the overdraft of dark energy and physical energy, plus soaking in water, blood loss, and fractures. It won't be long before someone will come over, and there will be medicine and proper treatment at that time. You should deal with your injury first. You're just an ordinary person, even if you're in the military. Is this really alright? Meng Yibei still looked worried with this appearance. It was hard for Su-Ran to imagine that it was this kind of body that pierced through the Yuncheng from the inside. Of course, the Yuncheng had already been scarred at that time. Su-Ran shook her head. I'm fine. It's you? Then I'm fine. Meng Yibei said, although it hurts, it's also very itchy. I can feel that my cells are wriggling, and the wound is healing itself. I'm really a monster now. Speaking of the latter, Meng Yibei's voice was a little low. Su-Ran glanced at him and said, when I go back, I'll try to see if I can stabilize your state. That way, you can still live, and you are still a human being now, and you haven't turned into anything ugly. Bugs, aren't they? Meng Yibei smiled, but she was very optimistic. She knew that Su-Ran was comforting her. What can such an ordinary soldier do? But Meng Yibei still hummed twice, and said, thank you. Maybe it's not necessary. Maybe the bug that controls me is dead. Otherwise, how can I come out? Things will definitely develop in a good direction. Things are bound to go in the right direction. Su-Ran was slightly stunned by this sentence, and did not speak for a long while. Chapter 5. The Girl Looking for the Way. Things are not going in the best direction. After saying conclusively that someone would definitely come to pick them up, Su-Ran waited on the beach with Meng Yibei. The injuries of the two people are not serious, and their condition is extremely poor. In this case, waiting for rescue is undoubtedly the best choice. During this period, Su-Ran asked a lot of questions on the sidelines, and confirmed that Meng Yibei's memory was not completely lost, or rather, it was not lost, but seriously confused. She couldn't accurately recall and stitch together the contents of her memory. It makes her look like she doesn't know anything. Moreover, this girl is very sure that Su-Ran is an ordinary soldier. This is mainly due to the fact that she just woke up and tortured Su-Ran. Then, they just waited. I don't know how long I waited. The night was getting darker and darker, but there was no shadow of the fleet floating in the sky. Su-Ran felt that this was unbelievable. Logically speaking, they should have landed on a certain island near the battlefield. The fleet should be able to find them if they search casually. How could they not be found? Puzzled, but there is no shadow of the fleet, and there are no so-called rescuers. But Su-Ran's condition is getting worse and worse. Unlike Meng Yibei, who is recovering himself, Su-Ran is a body of flesh and blood after all, and his body has already reached its limit. He cannot recover if he wants to recover. I don't know when it started. Su-Ran felt that her head was getting heavier and heavier, but her body was getting lighter and lighter. Plop. Sitting on the other side, Meng Yibei, who was silently thinking about his own thoughts, turned his head around in surprise, and saw Su-Ran lying on his back on the beach, unconscious. Meng Yibei was taken aback, and quickly stood up. As soon as she made a movement, her brows frowned, and she felt a sharp pain in her heart. She hadn't moved anywhere since just now. However, she still staggered over and looked at Su-Ran's situation. Anyone with a fever can cook eggs. Meng Yibei panicked. What should I do? Why haven't the rescuers come yet? Talking to himself, Meng Yibei turned his head and looked expectantly at the far end of the sea and the beach. However, the sea was calm, and so was the beach. Not even a bug could be seen at this moment. Meng Yibai suddenly realized, Su Ran should be too optimistic after all. They are ordinary soldiers. In this day and age, if they are missing, they are dead. How can anyone actually come to search and rescue them? He is so confused. I still believe what he said. But you are too confident. You have been burned like this, and you have always been so sure. Meng Yibai blamed himself, and hurriedly take action. It is obviously impossible to wait here any longer. If this continues, before the rescuers who may not arrive at all, the soldier may be burned to death. No, absolutely not. Meng Yibai clenched her teeth slightly, and slowly raised her hand. Power surged in the wind, and Su Ran's body slowly floated like this. Afterwards, the woman with dull silver gray skin walked towards the back of the beach step by step, leading Su Ran, who was suspended in the air. She wants to find out if there is anything useful on this island, at least find a cave, make a fire or something. Although her injury has been recovering on its own, it is actually quite serious, nothing else. All 4 legs were torn off by Su Ran, therefore, she didn't take a step, and the severe pain in her body almost made her want to howl immediately, but she still didn't stop, just took Su Ran to walk backward step by step, across a small forest area, looking for a cave. She couldn't watch such a person die like this. Along the way, the large and small wounds on her body burst open again, and the cuts of the 4 saber legs on her back were red again. However, after walking out of the grove and looking at the asphalt road in front of his eyes, Meng Yibai looked around blankly, and finally his eyes fell on Su Ran behind him. Sure enough, it should have been thought of a long time ago. How can you trust the words, analysis and judgment of a guy with a fever like this? Meng Yibai shook his head, sighed from the bottom of his heart, and stepped forward to go forward, whispering to himself, that's fine, then someone will have the medicine, but how can I explain my appearance? The awakening of skin mutations. Meng Yibei's soliloquy stopped abruptly, and the moment she stepped onto the road, she suddenly frowned in pain, her body bent down, and she grinned, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth, excruciatingly painful breathing with a soft sound from behind. She lost control of her abilities, and the unlucky Su Ran fell into the tangled grass. However, Meng Yibai seemed in extreme pain. Her whole body became shorter, her hands rested on the ground, she let out a strange cry like a wild animal, and her pupils were changing violently. The round black pupils began to tighten and narrow, like a piece of plasticine being pinched by invisible hands. About to change into another terrifying shape, Meng Yibai heard a certain voice neighing, roaring, and extremely furious in his mind. But soon, this feeling faded away, her pupils returned to normal, she fell to the ground, broke out in a cold sweat, frightened in her heart. At that moment just now, she felt a certain powerful consciousness. Her body spurted out, as if to expel her consciousness. That was the consciousness of the bug that existed in her body at that moment. Meng Yibai wanted to kill herself directly, because although she didn't tell Su Ran, she was very clear about the incredible power she now possessed. If that kind of power exists among humans, it will be a great help to humans. But if it is given to this worm, Meng Yibei's lips trembled slightly. She didn't take Su Ran's weapons, she just looked at the asphalt road in front of her, and had a decisive thought, just like this, she will be killed here completely. But at this moment, an unconscious groan came from the grass behind. Meng Yibei's thoughts were interrupted. She was stunned for a moment, then said she quickly stood up, ran to the back, looked at Su Ran who fell in the grass, and then remembered that she suddenly turned around and forgot about him. Meng Yibai quickly raised his hand, and let Su Ran's body levitate again, looked around in a daze, found a random direction, and walked forward. While walking, she looked at Su Ran who was frowning and unconscious, and couldn't help complaining, he is really an ordinary guy, no wonder no one comes to you, forgets about you, the sense of existence is too low. The night was filled. A half-naked girl with silver gray skin was walking on the deserted road, and a corpse-like figure floated behind her. This scene was unprecedentedly weird. Chapter 6 Caucasians. After walking for a while, some burnt and charred cars began to appear on the empty road parked on the side of the road, a desolate, post-apocalyptic landscape. This made Meng Yibei's plan to find a car go to waste. Although she doesn't really remember how to drive a car, Meng Yibai turned his head and glanced at Su Ran. He was still in a semi-conscious state, his face was a little red, and he made a meaningless murmur from time to time, and he didn't know what he was dreaming due to fever. Really? According to the acting method in Korean dramas, shouldn't the male lead and the female lead fall together? The female lead has a high fever and faints, and the male lead's boyfriend is full of strength? This is still a soldier, why is it like this? Gritting her teeth in pain, She led Su-ran and staggered forward. She looked at the surrounding scenes and words, frowned, and said to herself in a crying voice, "It's all in English, are we abroad?" I finally regained my consciousness. "Why did you treat me like this? I really want to eat a bowl of steaming, something steaming, damn it, I don't remember what I ate. Hey, I don't remember this, how can I still remember Korean dramas?" Meng Yibei walked forward while talking to himself. She felt that her body was also burning, and her whole body was in severe pain, as if she could pass out at any time, but she knew that she couldn't pass out. "Beetle, what can we do then? It doesn't matter if a monster dies." But Meng Yibei gritted his teeth and walked for a while, looking for a place to rest, but he didn't even see a decent building on the side of the road, but the shadowy forest around him kept shaking, as if something was hidden inside. Same can't rest. It's not safe here, but Meng Yibei gradually felt that his strength was a little weak. Su-ran's height suspended in midair was lowered and lowered again and again. After a moment of silence, Meng Yibei stood still, turned his head, and put Su-ran on his back. So heavy. Meng Yibei noticed that the opening on her shoulder was split again, and the severe pain made her mentally clearer. She couldn't help but howled, "Wow, why didn't I wake up alone on the deserted beach? Hey, Su-ran, don't die." And at this time, suddenly, Meng Yibei's heart tightened. She sensed something, and turned her head like lightning, looking at the roadside about 7 or 8 meters away from her in the dark night there. At some point, two people stood there. The special state of life endowed Meng Yibei with super night vision ability. It was a man and a woman. The man was in his 40s, Caucasian, tall, with a beard all over his face, holding a double-barreled shotgun in his hand, and was looking towards this side with a full face. The woman, on the other hand, looks to be in her early 20s, about 1.6 meters tall, also Caucasian, wearing a leather jacket, looking very youthful, of course. This is ignoring the messy clips on her body. Guns, but she stood beside the white man, but she looked as short as a child, but a bit petite. Seeing these two people, Meng Yibei was about to jump up in surprise. Without any pain in his body, he was about to rush over in a hurry, but the man over there raised the double-barreled shotgun in his hand and said in a deep voice, "Don't move." It was only then that Meng Yibei belatedly remembered what was wrong with him, stopped immediately, raised his hands quickly, and said in English, "We are not bad people. Don't look at me like this, I am an awakened person. It's my friend, he has a serious fever and is dying, I need your help." I didn't know I heard it, but Su-ran let out a painful hum in a timely manner. The man over there seemed very vigilant, and walked slowly towards this side. The double-barreled shotgun in his hand had not been put down, and he obviously wanted to take a closer look. However, the man was dawdling here, but the woman next to him couldn't help it anymore. She pushed her companion, and ran over quickly. Her movements were crisp and neat, which shocked Meng Yibei. The woman came here, touched Su-ran's forehead, and said "Ah" in surprise, and then shouted, "Come on. This man's burn is too serious." It really is English. Meng Yibei flashed this thought, it's really a foreign country. As the woman spoke, she expressed a little surprise at Meng Yibei's dull silver-gray skin, but at the same time, she also noticed the injuries on Meng Yibei's body, and while taking the burnt half-conscious Su-ran handed her the companion took off his clothes and put them on for Meng Yibei. The man was still very vigilant at first, but seeing that the woman seemed to believe that Meng Yibei was not a bad person, he could only sigh, put down the double-barreled shotgun in his hand, and came over to resist Su-ran. And at this time, Meng Yibei took the clothes handed over by the other party, and couldn't help being slightly stunned. At this time, she remembered that she was still in a state of naked clothes at this time. If those broken magma-like armors were not in terms of clothes, she can be said to be completely naked now. Of course, there are still some magma-like armors. Although the covering area is far from enough, it still covers all the important parts, so that Meng Yibei will not be too embarrassed. Insects don't care, but as a human, she does. Putting on her clothes quickly, she heard the woman say, "My name is Lucia, and this is Roger. You and your friends are terrible. Go back to the base with us first. We have a doctor there and a lot of medicine, may be able to help you." Meng Yibei also nodded, and walked forward, saying, "My name is Meng Yibei. This is Su-ran. Are you Asian, yet?" Meng Yibei nodded slightly and said, "Thank you all. You're welcome. In this day and age, shouldn't human beings help each other? I'm not a discriminator. In my opinion, the only difference between humans and aliens on Earth today." Lucia shook her head and said, "You really awakened? Your skin, well." Meng Yibei didn't explain too much. Her state is different from ordinary people. If she really explained it, if the other party couldn't accept it, she would become an enemy. I am an awakened person. What's your ability? It's so special. Although I haven't seen many awakened people, this is the first time I've heard that the skin of awakened people will turn into this silver gray color. Chapter 7, The Fishing Village of San Diego. Meng Yibei smiled awkwardly. Because of the injury, this smile seemed particularly forced. Maybe my ability is quite special. Noticing her condition, Lucia stretched out her hand and helped her. The tentacles were cool and smooth, and she couldn't help but admire. Your skin is good. Sure enough, it is said that Asians have good skin. You don't have to worry. The base is very close, and just a few hours ago, all the war bugs in this area were evacuated, and this place is also very safe. Meng Yibei nodded, and she followed them all the way forward, leaving the main road and walking along the woods. Meng Yibei wasn't too worried about being counted against. Although she was at the end of her strength and was in extremely poor condition, a dead camel was bigger than a horse. With the dark energy she could mobilize now, it was still possible to kill 2 ordinary survivors here. However, why did the bugs leave? Meng Yibei asked a somewhat puzzling question. In fact, she wanted to ask where this place was, but in the end she didn't say this question out of her mouth. I'm not very clear. Lucia shook her head while supporting Meng Yibei. That's right, they left suddenly a few hours ago. No one knows what happened, but it always good thing, isn't it? You should be grateful for the sudden withdrawal of the worm. Otherwise, the road should be full of worms now. Given the situation of the 2 of you, you might have been surrounded and killed by monsters long ago. Roger, who hadn't spoken much, opened his mouth. His voice was a bit dull, and although Surain was behind his back, there was still a look of vigilance in his eyes. It seemed that he still couldn't relax his vigilance against these 2 Asians who suddenly appeared leaving the road and walking through a forest path. For about 10 minutes, Meng Yibei saw Lucia's survivor base. In fact, it was just a fortified fishing village. The area of Nuoda's fishing village was divided into fortifications and weapons on the side close to the sea, but it also created a formation like an iron barrel. Arriving here, Meng Yibei also vaguely came to a conclusion in his heart. I'm afraid there is a high probability that it is the United States. However, one is Asia, the other is North America. How could I come to such a far place? Meng Yibei couldn't help but look at Surain, who was still in a semi-conscious state, and felt that the soldier had something important to hide from him. This made her feel slightly uneasy. Although many people were surprised and wary of Meng Yibei's peculiar skin condition, but under the guidance of Lucia, they didn't encounter any obstacles, and they entered the fishing village smoothly and met the doctor named Leander. There were also many people who came to help. Lucia patted Meng Yibei on the shoulder, and said, "You stay here first, Roger will accompany you. I will go out and explain. Don't worry, powerful awakened ones will be very popular." Thanks. Leander is probably in his 50s. He is an old doctor who has practiced for many years. He has a lot of medicine here. He put Surain on a sling bottle first, and then he started to help treat Meng Yibei's injury. Meng Yibei only knew simple medical first aid knowledge, and was useless because of the confusion of his memory. At this time, he could only actively cooperate and took out all the small medicine bottles that Surain had given her before. Leander couldn't understand the Chinese characters on it, and he didn't dare to use it. But he didn't refuse, so he accepted it for the time being, and used his own medicine to treat Meng Yibei's wound. Wow! Even the old doctor took a deep breath. In fact, Leander doesn't know what to say. In front of him, he can see that there are indeed 4 fractures. Judging from the trend of the bones, these should be some kind of bone-bearing organs growing from the woman's back. However, it was broken with a brute force. The fracture was not neat, and the bones were growing in the flesh and blood. What surprised Leander even more was that the wounds here clearly had traces of being soaked in seawater, and there were even traces of multiple bursts. They looked like wounds that had just occurred recently, but the degree of healing around these wounds was considerable. Even if those bones were not still protruding, they might have healed completely. This kind of self-healing ability can even be described as inhuman, but these bones have to be disposed of. Meng Yibei couldn't see his back, and asked blankly, "What's wrong?" Leander showed a hesitant expression, hesitated for a while, and then said after deliberation, "You have 4 bone spurs on your back. I'm afraid they need to be dealt with. I don't know why." Leander didn't say too much. It was completely considered from the perspective of a doctor. Leander said it more implicitly, but Meng Yibei also understood. "Okay, come with me. We have to go to the operating room at the back." Leander stood up and noticed that Meng Yibei was instinctively looking at Surain on the other side. The old man smiled wryly and said, "Don't worry, although he has a high fever although the injuries on his body are serious, They are far from what you see, and his physique is very good, so he cannot die. Meng Yibei just smiled, stood up, and walked forward with the other party. Leander said as he walked, "The medical environment here is relatively poor. I hope you don't mind, and the operation process is likely to be very painful. I'm afraid you will need a little anesthesia. You have a heart attack or something." Having said this, Leander paused slightly, and he suddenly realized, how could such an awakened person have a heart attack? And Meng Yibei waved his hand. "There's no need for anesthesia. It's not that I don't trust you. It's just that this thing may not be useful to me, and it would be a waste if it is used on me." Leander opened his mouth slightly, but now he didn't know what to say. Limited by the environment and conditions, the surgery was simple and rough. To Leander's surprise, Meng Yibei, a beautiful and weak girl, just bit a towel and went through the whole process without using anesthesia until Leander took it. 4 so-called bone spurs were planted, and the wound was disinfected and treated, but the girl did not make a sound. Moreover, it may be because there are people around, Meng Yibei no longer whispers quietly, and has been quite silent all the time. It was only when she spat out the towel in her mouth that Leander was shocked to find that the towel was about to be bitten to pieces, and he couldn't help but look at Meng Yibei on the other side. Meng Yibei smiled at him, a mouthful of sharp teeth. Leander's face hardened. Is this really human? Chapter 8. He is greedy for your body. Meng Yibei rested for a long time before she stood up. When she came outside, Su Ran still didn't wake up. She couldn't hold back, and muttered a few words in a low voice. Why is a big man so fragile, really? I didn't pass out after the operation, and I didn't wake up for a long time after I had a fever. When she looked up, she saw Leander looking at her curiously. Meng Yibei's face could not help but blush slightly. Her silver-gray face blushed slightly. It was quite obvious, but also a little cute. Fortunately, Meng Yibei muttered in Chinese, which Leander couldn't understand. As the night was deepening, Meng Yibei and Leander had a brief chat and confirmed that their current location was indeed in the United States and North America. Moreover, their current location is a fishing village called Festo, 70 kilometers outside San Diego, California, USA. When asked where he and Su Ran came from, Meng Yibei just took out the words he had told Lucia on the way here before, and only claimed that they were Chinese living here, who became awakened after the end of the world broke out. A few days ago, I went through a big battle and fell into the sea, so I got here by mistake. This kind of thing doesn't happen very often, but it's not uncommon. There are many people fleeing everywhere in this end-of-the-day era. Even in their survival base in the fishing village of Festo, at least half of the people are not locals. They fled from all directions. However, what Meng Yibei probably didn't expect was that what she said, to some extent, was even very close to the truth of the matter. Leander was not too skeptical. After all, although Meng Yibei seemed a little special, he was also a person with experience. He could tell that she was indeed a human being. Especially after this short contact, he realized that this Eastern women care deeply about their fellows, and that alone speaks volumes. Leander also comforted, you can rest here for a while, now that the bugs are gone, and here is close to San Diego, where there are a large number of troops stationed, so we are relatively safe here. Of course, if you have no place to go, we are also very willing to accept you. An awakened person is a huge asset for any survivor base. Okay. We'll think about it, thank you. Meng Yibei smiled. Afterwards, Lucia from outside came back, and she had roughly explained Meng Yibei's situation to everyone. Although her appearance was a bit shocking, she wasn't scary. On the contrary, she was quite amazing, especially since she was an awakened person. Lucia made a guarantee, and everyone accepted it. Lucia arranged a separate room for Meng Yibei. Su Ran stayed at Leander's place to continue observing, although Meng Yibei was still a little worried, but after hesitating for a moment, she agreed. She suddenly thought, she can't guarantee whether she will threaten others, so how can she help others? The night in California was dark. On the way, Meng Yibei heard from Lucia that the situation in California was very dangerous. There was a swarm of Skybrood war groups that were already on the verge of the border, but suddenly withdrew. Otherwise, now life is not so peaceful. Meng Yibei felt even more curious. Why did the worm, country fiction, swarm suddenly withdraw? What happened to stop these bugs from attacking humans? However, Lucia didn't know much about it, and Meng Yibei didn't ask any questions ignorantly after Lucia left. Meng Yibei stood in his room, exhaled a long breath, and smiled. He is really a warm-hearted and kind person. The room was not big and the equipment was very simple. Meng Yibei didn't care too much, and soon fell asleep under exhaustion. If there are books, it will be long, and if there are no books, it will be short. When Meng Yibei opened his eyes again, The sun was already shining brightly outside the window. Lucia brought a set of clothes to Meng Yibei, just enough to cover Meng Yibei's entire body, so as not to make her appear different all the time. Only then did Meng Yibei walk out of the room, and there were already many people busy outside. And it was a thriving scene. The structure and architectural style of the fishing village seemed to be in the 1980s and 1990s. Most of them are wooden structures. If it is not for the sea breeze, it will even make people feel like they have come to the Western era. What surprised Meng Yibei was that there was a young man standing at the door. This is of course also a Caucasian man, dressed in a cowboy style. When he saw Meng Yibei walking out, his eyes lit up slightly. Ignoring Lucia, who was standing beside her, he took a step forward and said with a handsome smile, "Hello, my name is Charlotte, you are the beautiful lady from the East. I took a glimpse yesterday, and I was attracted by your amazing beauty and temperament. I think you are new here, let me visit for your survivor base." This battle made Meng Yibei a little confused. She turned her head to look at Lucia beside her, but Lucia directly said to Meng Yibei, "Don't pay attention to him, he just wants to sleep with you, get out of Xiaolite, this is an awakened person, one slap can put you in the bug's ass." If Xiaolite's words made Meng Yibei's mouth twitch. Then Lucia's words made Meng Yibei's scalp numb, but she also understood that this Mr. Charlotte was obviously greedy for his body. Cough. Meng Yibei couldn't help but glance down at himself. In fact, she still had a little low self-esteem yesterday, and she always felt that she looked more like a monster, but looking at it now, it doesn't seem so bad. "Hey, the point is not crooked, go." Lucia gave Xiaolite a hard time, then took Meng Yibei's hand and walked to the other side, but Meng Yibei turned his head and smiled at Xiaolite. The 6 bright lines on his face flashed for a moment, illuminating the girl's bright smile. "You have good eyesight, but Miss Greedy's body is not right." Xiaolite stood there in a daze, and waited for Meng Yibei to walk away before she smirked. At this time, Meng Yibei had already asked, "What are we going to do? Eat? You must be hungry, right? I haven't eaten anything since last night, it's my fault, I forgot." Lucia was still as warm-hearted as ever. She didn't say Meng Yibei didn't feel it, but when she said it, Meng Yibei also felt hungry. After all, she was exhausted recovering her body, and she should have been hungry long ago. But Meng Yibei thought for a while, but asked, "Where is Suran?" Is that my companion?" I knew you were worried about him. I went to see him before you came, and the fever subsided, but he hasn't woken up yet." Lucia smiled heartily. "Don't worry, Mr. Leander is very reliable. He's here, and your friend will be alright." Chapter 9 Digger. Lucia was so enthusiastic, she took Meng Yibei all the way to their small cafeteria to have breakfast. A food for breakfast is actually very ordinary, coarse bread with boiled water. However, Meng Yibei is not the kind of picky person. She recalled little by little, in the end of the world, she even ate bark, grass leaves, small bugs and so on when she was fleeing. The food is simply too good. Accompanied by the surge of memories, Meng Yibei vaguely recalled many things, all of which were fleeing life after the end of the world. The shadows of some people kept dangling in front of her eyes, but they were all as insignificant as life in another life. Clear, but Meng Yibei noticed that many people were staring at him, so he took advantage of the situation and sat down, planning to eat a little and not go too far. However, what Meng Yibei didn't expect was that he couldn't stop talking within minutes. She was eating a 20-ounce loaf of bread by herself in this small cafeteria. Many people cast a different look. Meng Yibei felt a little embarrassed immediately, but at this time, another piece of bread was handed to her. Meng Yibei raised his head and saw that it was Lucia. The white girl was smiling at her in a trance. Meng Yibei felt that Lucia's figure overlapped with a certain shadow in her memory. It was a desolate night, and the howling of the insects came across the wilderness far away. In the dark weeds, many people hid in it. Many of those people were awakened, and they were chased and captured by the insects. On her own planet, fleeing like a bereaved dog in panic, with no clothing or food to eat, she sobbed in the shadows in panic, and someone handed her a piece of bread. She only remembered that it was a woman with fluttering long hair, rubbing her head, and said with a smile, "Be strong, you still have a long way to go. If one day you go down by yourself, you must remember, only a strong person can go farther than others." The voice gradually dissipated in the distant sky. Meng Yibei smiled and took the piece of bread. She is no longer embarrassed. She is indeed very hungry. Her powerful self-healing ability and resilience are not obtained by drinking air. It consumes her own substances. So right now she needs a lot of replenishment. Amidst the stunned expressions of the crowd, Meng Yibei ate more than 2 caddies of bread in about 10 minutes. That's when he clapped his hands and stood up. It was only then that she realized how useful her fangs were. This mere piece of bread would crumble easily in her mouth, and she didn't even need to chew it a few times. In fact, no matter from any point of view, this worm body is extremely easy to use, and it completely crushes human beings except that Meng Yibei's body consciousness may be deprived by him at any time. Afterwards, Meng Yibei went to check on Su Ran's situation. Meng Yibei was still quite concerned about Su Ran. After all, the two came to this place together, and they were both Chinese. However, Su Ran hasn't woken up yet. Leander shook his head at Meng Yibei and said, "Is this friend of yours also an awakened one?" "No." Meng Yibei shook his head directly. "He's not an awakened one." "Why do you ask that, really? If he's not an awakened person, then he's really lucky," Leander said. "His body is full of injuries, multiple fractures, severe blood loss. I thought he was an awakened person. So far, this is really lucky." "Is it so serious?" Meng Yibei was a little suspicious. She remembered that Su Ran chatted with her for a long time last night, and even made a move. Although Su Ran was also dizzy and said a lot of wrong information, but it seems. Where did Leander say such an exaggeration? However, Meng Yibei just smiled and said nothing. She came to Su Ran's side and looked at him. The soldier was lying on a narrow single bed, still receiving fluids. His face was no longer red, but his brows were still furrowed, as if immersed in some kind of nightmare. Really, this guy must have a bad temper, frowning in his dreams, and too weak. Meng Yibei pouted in his heart, and at this moment, she suddenly heard commotion outside. Many people are shouting something. Lucia's face changed slightly, and she ran out immediately, and ran back after a while. Her face panicked, and she said with an annoyed expression, "Damn it. It's Owen and the others. They went to search for supplies, but they didn't find anything, but instead found by the bugs. Hurry up, Leander, you take them to hide. It's a digger." Rumbling gunfire was being heard outside. Apparently the fortifications on the outer circle of the survivors' base had opened fire. As Lucia spoke, she wanted to hurry and go, but at this time, Meng Yibei took a step forward and said, "Wait a minute, I'll go with you." Lucia showed surprise and asked, "Although you are an awakened person, but your injury, it doesn't matter." Meng Yibei walked out and said with a smile, "I'm very strong." Looking at the girl with silver gray skin, Lucia was a little taken aback. The entire survivor base started to move. The heavy machine guns erected on the fortification wall of the fishing village had already fired, and the roar shook the ground, but in fact, the ground was really trembling. It was the diggers walking underground. Digger worms generally do not move freely, but now it is only a burrower attacking the survival base of the fishing village. Obviously, this is a fringe worm swarm that was left alone after the large-scale worm swarm retreated. The base of survivors in this fishing village is indeed lucky, and they can even come across such things. Meng Yibei followed Lucia all the way forward, and she saw that the entire survivor base moved accordingly, and people shouted and rushed towards the main entrance. A huge burrower is definitely a huge threat to the small-scale survivor base. If it is not handled properly, the entire survivor base may even be destroyed. But when they came to the main entrance, there was a sound of exclamation coming from the 5-meter-high fence. "It's gone! It's gone! Where did it go?" The survivors and soldiers on the fortifications all showed panic expressions, looking left and right, looking for the figure of the digger, and soon, someone erupted an exclamation. The main entrance of the outer wall of the survivor base was being pushed open with a loud bang. This oil was churning, and the digger forcibly dug in from under the gate of the survivor base made of steel. Amidst the earth-shattering noise, it broke through the ground forcefully and swallowed a car in one gulp. Howls shook the audience. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 10: The Queen Spares Her Life. In the survivor's base, the crowd was scattered in panic, and the huge body of the burrower was protruding from the ground a little bit. The ground shook, and many people even couldn't stand stably, and they were directly knocked over by the shock on the ground on the fence. Many people have already started to turn their guns. However, even if a 12.7mm caliber machine gun hit its body, it would be difficult to achieve results. At most, it would only dig out bloody holes, and this is very important for the huge body of this burrower. Literally, nothing at all at this time. The burly Roger ran over with a rocket launcher on his shoulders. He stood extremely steadily on the shaking ground, aimed and fired, all in one go. A rocket launcher instantly hit the body of the earth digger, and the blood splattered wildly. A spray of blood exploded on the body of the huge earth digger. Amidst the exclamation, A house in the fishing village on the other side collapsed amidst the loud noise. The digging insect dug through the house from the bottom up, and the people inside were devoured in one bite. Fortunately, it was thrown out, and with a collapsed house structure, it landed on the ground behind, screaming endlessly. Just this burrower turned the small survivor base upside down. At this moment, Meng Yibei was following Lucia here, and Lucia took the howitzer from a survivor soldier beside him, and fired into the smoke and dust of the collapsed house. In the smoke waves, the pale monster could be seen twisting its body and howling. It suddenly jumped out of the smoke and rolled on the ground. It is unknown how many people were killed and crushed to death, and the others retreated in panic, but Lucia saw from the corner of her eye that Meng Yibei was coming out of the crowd and moving forward. Lucia was slightly taken aback. She wanted to stop her, but she retracted her hand halfway out. Although this digger is very powerful, their survivor base can be ground to death with a little bit of grinding, but it is not known how many people will die if this Asian female awakener is really strong enough. Perhaps such unnecessary casualties can be avoided. Even so, to be on the safe side, Lucia followed up 2 steps and shouted, "Be careful. If it doesn't work, go back," and soon, Lucia realized that it was completely meaningless for her to worry about Meng Yibei's thoughtfulness when everyone was retreating. Meng Yibei, the only one who stood out from the crowd, became the nearest and only target of the digger. The gigantic pale monster opened its mouth wide. He exhaled a foul breath, and the rings, layers, and densely packed teeth reflected the cold light, and he shook his head directly, and slammed down on Meng Yibei in one gulp. At this moment, many people in the field showed expressions of horror, and almost all of them flashed a thought: this woman is dead. Even Roger changed color. Is this Asian woman a lunatic? Isn't it courting death to be so tough? But the bite of the digger worm failed to bite off, and its movements froze in midair. Meng Yibei only raised one hand, with a palm open, as if walking in the afternoon to block the sun, and the dark energy in the space was inspired by this, surging out, forcefully stopping the huge burrower. Under the powerful dark energy, its head froze in the field, its mouth was open, and foul-smelling saliva kept flowing out. But the second half of its body was writhing wildly and struggling desperately. If it was before, with the ability of this body, she could control the digger with a wave of her hand, but now, Meng Yibei's injury has not recovered, and this is already the strongest state she can achieve right now. However, Meng Yibei didn't quite know where the limit of her strongest ability was, but she knew that she seemed to be very strong now, so she didn't show much shock, but was trying to kill the earth digger with some difficulty. His head was crushed out of thin air. The expressions of the survivors present were all a little dull. Originally, many people were still running on the ground, preparing to avoid the attack and looking for a good shooting position, but now, seeing such an Asian woman controlling the digger with one hand, these running people suddenly feel very embarrassed, as if possessed by a playwright. But other than that, it was more shocking. It was a huge contrast that this slender woman restrained the huge burrower, not to mention, everyone knew how terrifying such a worm was. Roger and Lucia are also full of dull faces. Although Meng Yibei has always said that he is an awakened person, Lucia deduced according to common sense that the so-called awakened person is at most someone who has some strange abilities. They may be very powerful, but it is impossible to single out the diggers. That is to assist in combat and reduce everyone's burden. But Lucia looked at Roger instinctively. Her eyes were shocked, as if she was asking, how can she be so powerful? Fighting the digger alone. Roger also looked at her in a daze. How do I know? However, this sluggishness only existed for a short while. All those present were people who had survived for a few months in the apocalypse. Anyone who could hold a gun had experience in survival. Knowing that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, they opened fire one after another, and Meng Yibei is also working hard, trying to crush the head of this digger. However, with a deepening of her manipulation of dark energy, she also felt dizziness. Seeing this, she was ready to stop. Anyway, there is Lucia and the others. I don't need to do so much, as long as I control this side digger, let it become a living target. The firepower of Lucia and others is enough to kill it easily. At that moment, Meng Yibei withdrew a little bit of strength, and stopped trying so hard to kill the digger. However, when Meng Yibei withdrew his power, the earth digger felt a wave of extreme fear and awe, and made a pleading neigh with difficulty. The neighing made Meng Yibei startled, and even instinctively let go of the shackles of the dark energy. The earth digger howled, burrowed into the ground without looking back, and ran away. Because of this neighing, Meng Yibei actually understood the information in it. It seemed to be an inhuman way of transmitting information. The content of the expression was different from that of human voices, but the meaning was generally, "Your Highness, please forgive me." What does it mean? At this moment, With this thought gushing out, Meng Yibai suddenly let out a muffled groan, and her brain felt like a tearing pain, as if the consciousness of the bug hiding in her body was about to wake up. However, this made Meng Yibai realize something in a trance: the Earth Digger cannot escape, it must be killed here. Chapter 11. Lucia was probably surprised and didn't know what happened. Meng Yibai only turned his back to her, and the Earth Digger seemed to only let out an A, and the Asian woman let out a scream, covered her head, and lowered her body, looking very painful. The earthworm was liberated because of this, but it stopped attacking humans. Instead, it howled, turned around and ran away, drilling a big hole in the ground, and quickly disappeared. The diggers ran away. Lucia hurried forward and said, "Meng Yibai, are you alright?" However, before she approached, Meng Yibai turned to look at her. That look was so cold, Lucia stood there in a daze, as if she had fallen into an ice cave, and she noticed in horror that the eyes of the Asian woman had also changed, and they were normal human beings. The pupil, and the other one, turned into a line of silver-white linear pupils. Lucia didn't say a complete sentence for a long time, and when she came back to her senses, Meng Yibai was already a figure like lightning, and even jumped headlong into the big hole dug by the Earth Digger. There was a series of gasping sounds in the field. Jumping into an burrower's tunnel is almost unheard of. Lucia gradually came back to her senses. She clenched her teeth, hesitated for about 2 seconds, and jumped down amidst the exclamation. These two Asians were brought back by her, and she couldn't let them have an accident. At this moment, Meng Yibai was moving forward at high speed in the dark tunnel. This darkness has no restrictions at all for her. Under the enhanced night vision ability, the deep and dark caves are no different from daytime. She could even feel that the digger was advancing at a high speed, trying to escape in a hurry. It was a lone bug, and even the connection with the higher level bug swarm node had been cut off. It must not be allowed to give away the news that I am here. Meng Yibai had vaguely realized some kind of terrifying possibility that made her stand on end, so she wanted to kill the grass. Moreover, at this moment, in her brain, there are two strands of consciousness fighting fiercely, crisscrossing each other, as if to tear her brain apart in the middle. Yet she goes on, constantly running forward, riding on the strong wind of dark energy. Faster and faster. If you let that bug spread this information, it will be over. At least this survivor base will definitely be trampled down by the swarm. Meng Yibai felt that in her mind. There seemed to be a huge and hideous voice that kept roaring and shouting something. Her own body consciousness seemed to be kicked out of it at any time. The gap was too big, and she couldn't fight back, and she was powerless to fight back. She can only grit her teeth and stick to her own position. She already has the control of her current body. As long as she sticks to her position, she will not be taken away by the opponent in the dark cave. She even bit her own lip, which was bright red. Her consciousness gradually became blurred. She felt as if she was in two worlds, the real and the fake. Leaving the cave, her eyes lit up, and when she came back to her senses, she found that she was standing on the corpse of the burrower. The scarlet blood of the worm was everywhere, and its huge body exploded section by section. It opened, flowing wantonly on the ground like a puddle of muddy meat sauce that was smashed by someone. Looking at this scene, Meng Yibai was a little dazed. Turning his head, he saw Lucia standing on the other side panting. She seemed to have also come out of the tunnel. She pointed at Meng Yibai, who was panting. But he couldn't say a word for a long time. Meng Yibai looked at her, then at the dead digger corpse under her feet, then at the blood on her body. She opened her eyes. She wanted to say, "Don't worry, I've already killed it." Digger, but she couldn't say anything like that anyway. The worm was dead, but she was alive. Would she, the person who killed the digger, be more dangerous than this digger, knowing what is in my body, yet deceiving myself and others, and deceiving others to live? Is this unfair to everyone? Meng Yibai took a step forward and said, "Lucia, you killed." What Meng Yibai actually wanted to say was, "You kill me," but before she said those words, she felt dizzy for a while, her eyes dimmed, and she passed out. At the last moment of her unconsciousness, I heard Lucia's exclamation. What Meng Yibai didn't notice was that there was a drone hovering above her head. When I opened my eyes again, the setting sun was already setting outside the window, and the setting sun was like blood. Lucia was standing by her side, and when she saw her wake up, she couldn't help being surprised and said, "You finally woke up," which made me worry for a while. Meng Yibai just smiled. "Have I been in a coma?" "Yeah, since you killed the digger, you've been in a coma." "Huh. Are you conscious?" "Don't you know?" Meng Yibai smiled and shook his head. "That's good. Thank you." "Thank me for what?" Lucia laughed. "Speaking of which, we want to thank you. Everyone said that I picked up a man of God this time." If you hadn't acted in time today, our survivor base wouldn't know what to do. How many people were killed by that monster? Let me tell you, now, people are wealth, and people are resources. Houses can be built without food, and food can be planted without people, but without people, there will be no people to build houses, and when there are no farmers, the house and the land will be gone. Meng Yibai froze for a moment, and for some reason, she looked a little ashamed. How are you doing? It should be nothing. Meng Yibai felt it a little bit, and felt that his coma should not be the result of fighting the digger, but the result of the confrontation of consciousness in his mind. Fortunately, he suppressed the opponent. Meng Yibai breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She woke up from the big dream, and her desire to die was suppressed by the desire to live again. She was silent for a moment, and then asked weakly, "Can I take a bath?" This sentence stunned Lucia for a moment, and then she smiled and said, "Yes, there is the sea on the edge. As long as the seawater is treated a little bit, how can we not have water for bathing here? The most abundant thing here is water." Meng Yibai also nodded slightly, and under the guidance of Lucia, he took his first bath in this small fishing village. Since he regained consciousness, trouble ensued. The main character is reconnecting, so let's ask for a genuine copy. Chapter 12, Trouble at the Door. Meng Yibai took a hot bath and changed into dry clothes. Immediately, he felt that his spirit had improved a lot, and all the negative states of fighting for control of his body before seemed to have been wiped away. But at this time, it was completely dark outside, and under Lucia's guidance, she had a mouthful of dinner. Dinner is simple, fried fish and bread in the morning. Many people were slightly dissatisfied with Meng Yibai, a newcomer who ate so much for a meal, but now, from Meng Yibai walking into sitting down, everyone's face is full of awe. The chef even brought Meng Yibai a glass of wine himself. Meng Yibai smiled and nodded at him, but what he was thinking in his heart was, if I am a non-drinker, wouldn't it be embarrassing? Many white men in the corner even raised their glasses to her from a distance, which made Meng Yibai somewhat complacent. Fortunately, he was the one who was sober. If Suran was an ordinary soldier, he might not be able to get along now. No matter when, strength is everything. However, Meng Yibai's meal did not stop at the end. Roger ran in from the outside, with a serious face, and said, "There are people from San Diego, people from the military." Everyone in the room was surprised. Although here is not far from San Diego, and the other side is the territory of the military, the exchanges between the two sides are not close. The military will only provide some help when necessary. Like this season when the swarm retreats, the military really does not the reason for being here. Roger glanced around, and finally landed on Meng Yibai, who was sitting in the corner with Lucia, and said, "They are here to find you, eh?" When Meng Yibai followed to the front, he saw the lights shining outside the fence that had not been repaired, and a black military vehicle parked there. The high beams illuminated the perimeter wall of the survivor base in the fishing village as brightly as day. Soldiers armed with live ammunition stood in a row, but the first ones were several men in black, wearing the black sunglasses in the same color movie. Seeing Meng Yibai walking out in crowds, the first middle-aged man in black was walking. Taking a step forward, he looked at Meng Yibai and said, "Are you the awakened one? You know me. I tore an earth digger with my bare hands. How could I not recognize it?" The man in black stretched out his hand, said, "I'm Angus Gibbon, the head of the San Diego Special Operations Investigation Section. Our reconnaissance crew's drone filmed the entire process of your hunting diggers. We need you to come with us one trip." Meng Yibai took a half step back a little later, feeling a little nervous in his heart, but still put on a deadpan expression on his face. "I'm just an awakened person, and I don't want to serve your army either." Angus smiled lightly and said, "Although I don't know your name yet, Miss Asia, you clearly misunderstood something. First of all, although my tone was very polite, the fact that I need you to come with us does not mean that you can refuse. Secondly, I am not inviting you to hire. In fact, according to our expert evaluation, your dark energy manipulation level should have broken through 3S. The level is a level that is theoretically impossible to achieve." And, when Angus said this, he looked up and down Meng Yibai's skin color, which was obviously different from others, and said, "You should also know that you are easy to be misunderstood. For example, you may not be human." These words made Meng Yibai's expression change, especially when the other party said that you might not be human, which almost hid her deepest secret, and these words also made Lucia's heart tremble slightly. She suddenly remembered the terrifying expression of Meng Yibai she saw in the battle today, and the linear pupils. But today Meng Yibai saved their survivor base. Lucia immediately said, "What do you mean? It doesn't mean much." Angus said, "Miss Asia, I need you to cooperate with us. Otherwise, the consequences may be unbearable for you. As if responding to his words, behind him, those men in black all took a step forward, and everyone burst out a certain surge of dark energy, which normal people can't detect, but for Meng Yibei in the world of dark energy, these people are as conspicuous as fish stirring up a calm lake. These men in black are actually awakened ones. Moreover, following the actions of these men in black, the US troops with live ammunition behind them also raised their guns one after another, and surrounded Meng Yibei, Lucia and others in a semicircle. Meng Yibei was silent for a moment, and said with a sneer, 3S level. Do you think I am a powerful card? But, since you know my ability is very powerful, do you really think these people can stop me? Angus seemed to see through the woman's guilty conscience, and the expression on his face remained unchanged. Our intercontinental missiles have already aimed at this place. As long as you make a move, the people behind us will raise this place to the ground. These words made Meng Yibei's face turn pale. Hard enough, she turned her head and glanced at Lucia and the others, whose expressions changed slightly, and sighed silently in her heart. However, she still did not want to fall into the hands of the US military, saying, I always want to know, why do you say that I am not human? Give me reason, and I will go with you. Angus glanced at Lucia and the others, obviously not wanting to say anything in front of these ordinary survivors, but he quietly stared at the stubborn Meng Yibei in front of him, sighed, and said, Are you Asians, right? I don't know if you've heard of the Xinjiang fleet in Asia. Meng Yibei frowned. She tried her best to remember, but she had never heard of the Xinjiang fleet, but she said nothing. Xinjiang fleet, they are cooperating with a group of extraterrestrial civilizations that can control the human body. Angus has been paying attention to the changes in Meng Yibei's expression. He saw that Meng Yibei's expression did not change, so he did not expect. Now there are still people on the Earth who don't know about the Xinjiang fleet, so they continued, and, just yesterday, the Xinjiang fleet traveled thousands of miles and destroyed another alien ship whose identity, type, and capabilities are unknown at present. Battleship, therefore, we have reason to suspect the two, who appear here now, showing certain inhuman features and dark energy control far beyond the limit of human beings, may be a suspected alien individual. As a person who has personally seen the scene of Meng Yi tearing up the earthworm with his bare hands, Angus knows how terrifying the delicate-looking woman in front of him is. Intercontinental missiles are just a defensive measure, and no one wants to kill people with real actions, so he explains so much. Chapter 13. Where did that woman go? Meng Yibei's head started to hurt from thinking about it, but he still didn't recall anything related to the term Xinjiang fleet. This means that it's not that she doesn't remember, but that she has never heard of it. This should have happened after she was arrested. And looking at the expressions of Lucia and the others, they have obviously heard this term before. Xinjiang fleet. Lucia was surprised. Didn't they draw a clear line from the swarm, divide and rule? Why? Could it be that the large-scale retreat of the swarm is also because of them? Angus didn't have any reason to answer Lucia's question, as if he didn't hear her talking at all. He just looked straight at Meng Yibei in front of him. After a moment of silence, Meng Yibei nodded slowly. Okay, then I will cooperate with your investigation. Only then did Angus smile, shifting his identity slightly, and said, Please. Lucia opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but noticed that Meng Yibei gave her a look. The white girl could only choke back the words she wanted to say, and just watched Meng Yibei being handcuffed symbolically and sent into the military vehicle ahead. Afterwards, the men in black and the members of the U.S. Special Forces all got into the car one after another, and quickly left here. With the light disappearing at the end of the field of vision and the road, they disappeared in the blink of an eye. Roger said, It's really, damn it, she saved our survivor base, but instead caused her troubles. What is this? Lucia shook her head, but said, That friend of hers is still here. We have to take good care of him. Saying that, Lucia went all the way back to the survivor base, and everyone looked very ugly. The long night is long. If there are books, it will be long, and if there are no books, it will be short. The next morning, when Lucia opened her eyes, she heard that Miss Meng's friend had woken up. When she heard the news, she ran to Leander's small clinic as fast as she could, and saw the Oriental man sitting on a single bed, looking around blankly, and the first thing she said was, You finally woke up. Su Rain was confused. He looked at the white girl in front of him who he didn't know at all and said to himself with surprise, You finally woke up, and he was even more confused. I don't know you. Who are you? Why is this face so enthusiastic? Do we know each other well? Am I losing my memory? Yes, I have a fever, but do fevers also cause amnesia? Could it be that this is the new nurse that my fleet has recruited? Tisk tisk, when did Lao Yuan have such a strong taste? And he specially recruited a white nurse to take care of him? What if this old beautiful spy? However, Su Ran quickly realized that she didn't seem to be in her territory right now. In this dark room, there are two white men, an old man and a young man in front of him. Where is this? Su Ran first said it in Chinese, and then said it again in English. Lucia responded quickly, saying a series of place names. Up to here, Su Ran can understand everything. However, later on, Lucia still explained the situation and told about Meng Yibai being taken away. Su Ran was just Monk Zanger who couldn't figure it out at this time. Su Ran noticed that his simultaneous interpretation device had been lost long ago, and it was swept away by the sea somewhere, and this kind of thing is not so important necessities, and it is also in Su Ran's watch space. There is no equipment. Fortunately, one resource point can build 3. He immediately spent one of his remaining 2 resource points to start building, and it only took 15 minutes to finish building. Next, it was 15 minutes of wide-eyed staring. Lucia and Leander looked bewildered, wondering how could an Asian appearing in North America not speak English. How does he live? Lucia whispered, he's not a smuggler, is he? Leander shook his head, no, it's probably Ms. Meng's husband. She speaks English very well, so there's no need for him to learn it. Well, isn't he too lazy? Lucia couldn't help but look at the pale Su Ran twice, and said, I said, he was the one who was unconscious before. Why is this man so useless? He and Meng Yibai, the relationship between them can't be that Meng Yibai is raising this man, right? Leander didn't say a word. Although he didn't speak, the implication behind his words was that he agreed with him very much. He felt that Su Ran was the kind of little boy in the Oriental population. Su Ran stared at these two people and watched them whispering, always feeling that they were not speaking well of herself. However, he himself also sorted out his current situation. He probably didn't wait for rescue, and he was burned and confused first, and was taken by Meng Yibai to find someone. Moreover, judging from this situation, I actually came to California, which is not only a star and a half away from the isolated island in the Pacific Ocean that I estimated before, but it's normal. The area where the battle was fought at that time was relatively close to North America, so it was lucky that he didn't wake up in the sea. Of course, it also depends on his own dark energy physique. Although Su Ran is criticizing him every day for losing his 15,000 resource points, but this time, he can live smoothly until now, basically because of his strength and physique. Credit, if not for this, he would have drowned in the sea without having a fever. However, where did Meng Yibai go? Could it be that she lied to me and ran away by herself? No. If so, why save me? Damn it, I don't know what happened to my fleet, whether the bugs have been contained. Spore life is also a big threat, and China. 15 minutes passed in wild thoughts. Su Ran took out a simultaneous interpreter under the stunned eyes of Leander and Lucia, and said to each of the 3, where's Meng Yibai? Lucia, you have this kind of thing, why didn't you take it out just now? Su Ran shook her head, didn't intend to answer, and asked repeatedly, where's Meng Yibai? Seeing that Su Ran didn't answer her, Lucia could only tell the story. After all, if these two people are really husband and wife, Su Ran still needs to know the situation, and Lu Ziya still remembers that Meng Yibai has a lot to do with Su Ran, not only Su Ran's face, but also Meng Yibai's what? She was taken away by the US military. Su Ran immediately changed his color when he heard the news, stood up suddenly, and said murderously, where's it? Lao Mei took Meng Yibai away, isn't this taking away a time bomb? Su Ran's murderous look shocked both. Lucia, this man has been in a coma for 2 days, why is he so energetic when he wakes up? Chapter 14. Have you heard of the Xinjiang fleet? Su Ran didn't expect that she would be in a coma for 2 whole days. The war has just ended, but everything has not been resolved, and I am not in the fleet. Being in a coma for 2 days is really too late. However, the most important thing right now is undoubtedly to find Meng Yibai. Although judging from the descriptions of Lucia and others, Meng Yibai's state has always been quite normal. It seems that it is still a state dominated by human personality, and even helped these old beauties solve an Earth Digger crisis, and it is precisely because of this time he was targeted by Lao Mei. It's been a whole night since Su Ran woke up after being taken away. That's a ticking time bomb. Su Ran is not worried about Meng Yibai, but worried about the US troops who took Meng Yibai away. Seeing this, Su Ran said directly, is it the San Diego garrison who took her away? Su Ran has never been to the United States, and she doesn't know much about the United States, but she barely knows that San Diego is an important military city in California. There are bases for the 3 armed forces here. Of course, it is also a little herd. Lucia nodded, that's right. As she spoke, She couldn't help touching the simultaneous interpreter in her ear. She had never been exposed to such exquisite and accurate simultaneous interpretation equipment, but Su-Ran nodded and said directly, "Do you know the way? Take me there, huh?" Both Lucia and Leander were taken aback. Lucia said, What are you going to do? Bring Meng Yibei back?" Su-Ran's tone was normal. Going to the U.S. military is indeed a very dangerous move, but Su-Ran made this decision after careful consideration. From Lucia, Su-Ran learned that almost all the bugs in this area have been removed. He wants to. If you want to accumulate resource points by killing insects, you almost have to start from scratch, but today is different. The fleet can't wait that long, and neither can Su-Ran. Therefore, the key is to quickly contact the strongest armed force in the place and quickly find a way to get in touch with the fleet. Moreover, the large-scale retreat of the insect swarm also gave Su-Ran a signal. His battle in the Pacific was not useless. The central hive was really destroyed. Otherwise, with the combat mode of the swarm, they would never and should not waste time at this time. Withdraw the entire army and stop attacking humans. The occurrence of this thousands of miles without insects situation only means that their hive command system has been paralyzed, and many war insects are at a loss as to what they should do. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and the tide of human counterattack is coming. But at this stage, the fleet should be the most dangerous. Judging from the final situation of the Pacific War, the destruction of the central hive does not mean that all hives will be leaderless, and the high-level hives still have their own military capabilities. Under such circumstances, they are very likely to regroup and point their swords at the emptiest Xinjiang fleet, or even wipe it out in one fell swoop. Thinking of this level, Su-Ran became a little anxious, wishing to return to the fleet to sit in command. Immediately hearing Su-Ran's tone, Lucia couldn't help but said, "I said, Mr. Leander, did his head burn out? Do you know where the San Diego military district is? I only saw them take people away. But I have never seen anyone bring someone out of it, not to mention. You are an Asian. What's wrong with the Asians?" Su-Ran said, "You see, although the simultaneous interpreter I gave you is not something extraordinary, its craftsmanship and level are far higher than the top simultaneous interpreters in the world that you know above. I am not an ordinary person, and Meng Yibei is not an ordinary person as you imagined, so my head is not burned out. You just need to lead the way." Su-Ran's words were quite confident, showing the courage of a fleet commander. If Lucia and Leander had not had a bad impression of him after being in a coma for several days, this momentum alone would have given him a bad impression. Squeezed by these two people, however, Lucia and Leander looked at each other, but they still believed it. Indeed, they have never even seen an awakened person like Meng Yibei, let alone such a thing. That the military was immediately dispatched to ask for someone. After hesitating for a while, Lucia still asked with some doubts, "Then what's your plan? I heard that there have been such strange things in China that pretended to be very powerful to trick the police into letting people go. You don't plan to pretend to be a pig and eat a tiger?" Su-Ran shook her head with a black face. "No, don't worry, I never pretend to be a pig, I only eat tigers." Lucia wanted to say, "You are bragging. The military base of the 3 armed forces in San Diego does not know how many soldiers and advanced equipment there are. Why do you have it?" But thinking so, Lucia still believed that Su-Ran had a solution. After all, she had already believed that Meng Yibei was not an ordinary person. At that moment, she simply cleaned up and took Su-Ran on the road while Lucia was driving. Roger sat in the co-pilot's seat holding a double-barreled shotgun, and Su-Ran sat in the back row, trying to contact the fleet with the remaining communication devices in his watch space, but there was no signal. Su-Ran estimated that the distance might be too far. After so many days, 80% of the fleet has returned to Xinjiang. When the Yunchang fell, Su-Ran had been paying attention to the situation of the fleet. He had already noticed that the other warships were already at the end of their strength, and they would not be able to last long after the battle was over. Things are a little tricky, however. Looking out along the way, it turned out that on the road, in the wilderness, and even in the far end of the sky, not even a bug could be seen. Su-Ran obtained a lot of information from Lucia, and confirmed more and more that the weird shrinking state of the bug swarm, it is the illustrious result of the Pacific Battle of the Xinjiang fleet. Lucia couldn't help but said, "I think it might be the Xinjiang fleet." Did it Angus who came back just talk about the Xinjiang fleet? They are really amazing. Roger also opened his mouth and said, "It should be so. It is said that since the last Sky Brood War, the Xinjiang fleet has been standing still, and now Thunder is taking action to wipe out the swarm. Otherwise, the current global situation is like this. Who has the power to make the swarm such power?" These two people sat in the front, talking about all kinds of legends about the Xinjiang fleet, boasting back and forth. Even Su Ran, who was as thick-skinned as a city wall, sat in the back and his face turned red. I don't know, should I say I am the leader of the Xinjiang fleet in an understatement, but at this time, Lucia turned her head and asked, by the way, you are Asian, have you been to Xinjiang? Have you seen the Xinjiang fleet? Su Ran hesitated, but still shook her head. I haven't been there, I haven't seen it. What's the matter? Oh. Lucia was a little disappointed, and then said excitedly, some people say that Xinjiang is China's next-generation heavy industry base, and the entire Xinjiang is empty, and huge equipment is constantly building powerful. This is how the Xinjiang fleet was built. Have you heard of it? Chapter 15. I want to meet your leader. I've never heard of it. Who made this rumor? Su Ran couldn't laugh or cry. She didn't expect that her fleet would be rumored to be so evil. When it came to Lao Mei's side, he thought to himself, maybe this is the modern version of rumors. After all, the current global situation is such that most places do not have communications and networks, and many news transmissions have returned to the original person-to-person transmission. Based on hearsay, it is normal for various changes to occur, isn't it? Lucia looked even more disappointed. Su Ran didn't quite understand what she was excited about, so it was difficult to give any precise comfort. It was Roger who asked, so, are you living in Asia after the end of the world, or are you always on our side? Su Ran was silent for a while, and then laughed. Asia. It's just a coincidence that I came here to you. This answer made both Lucia and Roger change their colors. There is a piece of Pacific Ocean between Asia and North America, and right now, who doesn't know that the Pacific Ocean is full of monsters, and even the aircraft carrier fleet of the United States can't set sail? Who can cross the ocean from Asia to North America at this time? This is too incredible. From Su Ran's tone and demeanor, both Lucia and Roger could see that he was not exaggerating. The two finally realized belatedly, this young Asian might really be a powerful person. Next, the atmosphere became dull. They walked all the way, and when they arrived in San Diego, it was already noon. The swarm had shrunk and retreated for more than 3 days, but the gunpowder smoke in San Diego hadn't dissipated. In the bleak sky, when driving into the city, Su Ran first saw a bleak scene full of devastation. The fences built, like the new capital, are symbolic fence buildings, which are used to erect heavy weapons and steps. In fact, when the end of the world comes, many survivors will have doubts why the walls of the bases established by ordinary survivors will find ways to make them very high, but the large-scale military-controlled survivor bases are not. The answer is actually very simple. Ordinary survivors' bases have a small population, and the amount of work to build a fence is much smaller. Moreover, they lack heavy weapons, so they can only start from the fence, but it can be seen from the previous burrow or attack. In fact, the function of the fence is better than nothing, and it is impossible to play a key role like intercepting zombies, and the military's survivor base is based on these two considerations, and only builds a fence based on the construction of a firepower network in a cordon, so the wall will not be raised very high on purpose, and in terms of defense, the latter is undoubtedly stronger. The same is true for San Diego. The wall is not high. There is no sky-reaching wall that can be seen outside the city. Only when you go deep into the city and get closer can you see the wall like a bunker. There is also a bayonet here, and when it was about to arrive, Su Ran said directly, go back, I will go by myself next time. Lucia and the others are not bad people. In a sense, they are helpful to him. Su Ran doesn't want to involve them in unreasonable right and wrong. Lucia wanted to say something, but was held back by Roger. The middle-aged man nodded at Su Ran, then take care. Well, thank you very much. I will never forget you if I have a chance in the future. When Su Ran said this, she changed the subject slightly and said, however, you have to return the simultaneous interpreter I gave you first. Lucia, Roger, there is no way, there are not many resource points left, and it is better to use some leftovers. Although it is impossible that there are no people who can't speak Chinese in the US military, or there is no relevant translation equipment, Su Ran feels that he is still prepared. After retracting his simultaneous interpreter, Su Ran walked in the direction of the checkpoint. There are quite a few military personnel here, all of whom are burly and tall white men, armed with guns and live ammunition, and it seems that even if the swarm retreated, they did not relax their vigilance. Others are rushing to enter San Diego, only Su Ran is rushing to these soldiers. Su Ran first handed over a simultaneous interpreter, and after the leading white soldier put it on in doubt, he said boldly, I want to see your leader. The soldier widened his eyes, laughed as if he saw something funny, and said something to the people beside him before replying, who do you think you are? You, He couldn't finish his words, because the next moment, he floated up. Su-Ran raised her hand after sleeping for 2 days. Su-Ran found that her dark energy control had barely recovered, and she could barely use it now, which was more than enough to deal with such a small soldier, and I don't know why, maybe because of the bloody battle with Meng Yibei before, Su-Ran felt that he had a stronger control over the dark energy, and it didn't seem so strenuous to lift a person at this time. But this scene made everyone look surprised and angry, and people around raised their guns one after another. But Su-Ran looked directly at the soldier who was lifted up by him with a panicked face, and said word by word, "Tell them, I am Yuan Lichen, Deputy Commander of the Xinjiang Fleet, and I won't see your commander within 5 minutes. I guarantee that San Diego will be overshadowed by the Xinjiang Fleet." After all, Su-Ran has been a commander for so long, and led the fleet to fight through. The momentum of these two sentences combined with the dark energy gushing out is quite effective. The face of the white soldier who was still smiling just now was instantly, to put it bluntly, I obviously believe that by 50% or 60%, and hurriedly yelled in English, "Su-Ran looked like my fleet might come at any time." Full of confidence and confidence this is the case, the Xinjiang fleet is haunted, and it is no longer a problem to attack thousands of miles, especially since they have just completed an epic battle in the Pacific Ocean. I said that my fleet can come at any time. Who would dare not believe it? Who can bear the consequences of unbelief? Therefore, even if Su-Ran is actually a serious missing person in the fleet, he can pull the banner of the fleet to fool people without violating harmony, and it is quite effective. The terrified cry of the soldiers controlled by Su-Ran moved other people, and soon, someone hurried away, and after a while, a man who looked like an officer ran out with an interpreter, looking, however, understanding that the soldier who was lifted up in the air with dark energy out of thin air. His face changed several times. He looked at Su-Ran, and said, "Who are you?" P.S. This chapter explains the problem of the short wall. Because I found out later that someone complained about the use of the author's head being as short as the wall of the new Beijing city. Although he may not be able to see this chapter, let's talk about it. Chapter 16 Bravado. The process went surprisingly smoothly. The officer in charge of the checkpoint took Su-Ran to meet Mr. Angus, the officer of the so-called Special Operations Department. It was in a small dark room in the army base. Angus was older than Su-Ran imagined. As soon as he sat down, he said, "We compared the information database. You are not Yuan Lichen, but Su-Ran is the true leader, commander and founder of the Xinjiang fleet today." Regarding the rapid exposure of her disguise, Su-Ran did not show any surprise. She touched her nose and smiled, and said, "Do I have such a famous name? But, you have already seen through things like me, so you shouldn't be here. Will you take it out and say it?" At a critical moment, Su-Ran suddenly remembered that she had angered that American diplomat named William when he was at the headquarters of the Xinjiang fleet. "In fact, I would personally recommend doing a DNA comparison on you, but the problem is, we don't have your DNA information, and according to unreliable intelligence, you may not even be human." Haha, Mr. Angus, you really speak directly. Su-Ran smiled and said, "But I don't like directness. I advise you to be more tactful, otherwise San Diego will be destroyed." Next, saying that, Su-Ran glanced at the wall with one-way glass on one side. In fact, in the monitoring room behind that wall, a staff officer of the army base is standing there, and at this moment, the entire senior management of San Diego is monitoring the conversation here in another secret conference room, showing extreme importance. It was only after Su-Ran said these words that the staff officer standing in the monitoring room changed his face slightly. Does he know where he is? How dare he be so arrogant? A technician sitting in front of him hesitated, and whispered, "He just blew up an alien warship in space, and defeated the swarm of bugs." The staff officer fell silent, but Su-Ran was indeed extremely arrogant. "Are you kidding me? He single-handedly wanted someone. If you don't be arrogant, who can treat you like an onion?" Moreover, it is reasonable for the US side to find out his true identity, but Su-Ran is sure that the US side cannot get the fleet's movements. On this premise, the other party has to believe anything he fools. But Su-Ran soon realized that the Angus sitting opposite him seemed to be a veteran. Facing Su-Ran's radish end stick, Angus had a suspicious smile on his mouth, leaned forward slightly, and did not answer Su-Ran's question at all, but said, "Mr. Su-Ran, I have been in the military for many years and have received the most professional training. I have always been engaged in the investigation and handling of inhuman and supernatural phenomena. After the arrival of the swarm, I served as the executive officer of the Special Operations Team in the San Diego area of California. The main responsibility is also relevant, and 10 years ago, I received my master's degree in psychology from Princeton University." Speaking of this, how could Su-ran fail to hear that this man was saying, "I think you are bluffing. This is really a smart guy." Su-ran's evaluation of him in the bottom of her heart suddenly rose several grades, but unfortunately, he is just a person who is in charge of inquiries and reception here, maybe a capable team leader, but he is far from being able to speak out on his own. Moreover, even if his superiors could make the same judgment as him, they would not dare to do so. The answer is very simple. When there is no basis, a judgment is just a judgment. Once this kind of judgment is wrong, no one can afford the consequences. Therefore, as if Su-ran didn't understand the meaning of his words, she said with a smile on her face, "Within 15 minutes, I will see the person I want to see intact. Otherwise, I can't guarantee Bay America will become the next Kyushu Island, but San Diego will definitely become the next Chendicheng. Are you threatening us?" Angus jumped up, as if he didn't pay attention to Su-ran's words at all, because from Su-ran's reaction, he had surprisingly drawn a further step. Judgment. Su-ran is bluffing. Although Angus didn't know why such a fleet commander was bluffing here, he was sure that there was no fleet behind Su-ran at this moment. No one would have thought that the majestic founder of the Xinjiang fleet, "Your Excellency Commander," would be drawn here because of the war and entered the sea, and temporarily lost contact with the entire fleet. This is simply impossible. Therefore, it is not impossible for such a big man to appear here at this moment, claiming that he brought a fleet. "Your Excellency, you are really a person who likes to do things yourself." However, at this moment, Angus believed in his own judgment very firmly. The person sitting in front of him was just bluffing. Therefore, Angus did not give an inch at this moment, and even wanted to arrest the other party directly, and locked him up first. Su-ran didn't say a word, nor was she dissatisfied with Angus' rudeness. She just raised her head slightly and looked at the white gentleman in front of her, with the expression of a tourist admiring monkeys. Angus glared back. He felt that Su-ran was humiliating himself. The two fell into a stalemate, and the atmosphere was rather awkward and dull. Fortunately, this didn't last long. As time passed, soon, a voice sounded from the Bluetooth headset Angus was wearing. "Angus, I'm Lieutenant General Noah. What do you think you are doing? Do you know who is sitting in front of you? Do you want San Diego buried?" The other party's tone was strong, and he suddenly connected, followed by 3 curses, which caught Angus off guard for a moment, and without avoiding Su-ran, he instinctively said, "Your Excellency, Lieutenant General, I think he is, not you think, but I think. Are you kidding about San Diego? Can you stop a space fleet? I know what you're thinking, he's probably bluffing. Indeed, our radar didn't find him the shadow of the fleet, and the definite information shows that his fleet suffered heavy losses in the previous Pacific War, but I must remind you that before the defeat, the swarm probably had the same idea as you." The stern Lieutenant General paused slightly when he said this, and slowed down his tone, and said, "Also, do you think there is a high possibility that a fleet commander will come to us alone? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 17. Can I take people away? Su-ran quietly looked at Mr. Angus in front of him and muttered for a long time, and finally even walked out, and came back after a while. Only this time, Angus' expression became even uglier. Although he made the judgment that Su-ran doesn't have a fleet behind him now, he didn't have any evidence, and he didn't have any reason to explain why such a big man would appear alone at this moment without a fleet. It's here in the opinion of Lieutenant General Noah, if he cannot answer these 2 questions. He cannot deny that there is no fleet behind Su-ran. Angus couldn't prove it either, especially now that the Xinjiang fleet just defeated a series of shocking opponents 3 days ago. Who would dare to provoke this fleet? What's the difference between that and courting death? And so far, what to do next is very simple. Angus sat down in front of Su-ran and said, "In our country, this has never happened and never happened before, so I can take Meng Yibai away?" With a smile on Su-ran's face, she poked her neck forward slightly tentatively. Angus smacked his mouth and felt that his throat was a little dry. After a while, he gritted his teeth and said, "That's right. Your Excellency Commander, you can take her away." Angus was dissatisfied. "This is a pure threat and intimidation by force." Su-ran nodded and said, "Okay. It would have been better if this was the case earlier. Then, I will give you another hour. In 1 hour, I will see her in a room with a suite, hot water, and a good view. You are." Angus' first reaction was that the commander was playing tricks on them, But then he realized that this was Su Ran trying to sell face to the US side. Man, I bring it up, but I don't take it away, isn't that what it means? Thinking of this level, Angus's gaze towards Su Ran changed a lot. It's not so arrogant and unreasonable at that moment. Angus stood up quickly, and the previous dissatisfaction and resentment seemed to have weakened a lot, and said, "Okay, then wait a moment." Afterwards, Su Ran was brought into a tea room to drink tea. An hour later, he successfully checked into the presidential suite of a hotel with the best preserved facilities in San Diego and met Meng Yibei sitting in the suite. When Meng Yibei saw that it was Su Ran who opened the door and walked in, especially after noticing that Angus, with his nostrils upturned, was following Su Ran like a follower, Meng Yibei immediately looked astonished, not understanding what was going on. What's the situation? After being brought to the military region by Angus, although Meng Yibei's treatment was not good, it was not bad either. There was food and drink, and it was just a small single room. What important information did she get here? But just now, she was inexplicably brought here from a small single room. This really surprised Meng Yibei. At the beginning, she thought it was the US side. Recruit yourself, a powerful awakener. Originally, she was thinking about whether there would be any conspiracy behind this, but she didn't expect to see Su Ran just like that. Moreover, judging from this appearance, it doesn't look like Su Ran was invited here. Su Ran took a look at Meng Yibei and confirmed that the girl was not crazy, so she breathed a sigh of relief in her heart, looked disdainfully at Angus who was following behind, and said with a half smile, "There is no surveillance in this room, monitoring equipment." Angus thought to himself, "You have a fleet with powerful technology in your hand. Is there any monitoring and listening equipment that you can't find out?" Angus quickly said, "No. We are very sincere, how can we do such a thing?" What he didn't know was that Su Ran really didn't have such a thing in his hand. The only resource point left is simply not enough to do anything. However, after receiving the admonishment from his superiors, Angus is now much more honest and docile. Meng Yibei looked at this scene but was a little surprised. This Angus has always had a sense of superiority towards him. How did he become like this when he came to Su Ran? After Angus left, Meng Yibei asked, "What's going on? Why did you appear here? And why?" "I'm a Chinese soldier." Facing such Meng Yibei, who regarded himself as an ordinary person, Su Ran really didn't know how to explain it, and was too lazy to explain, so she said, "Although I'm just an ordinary soldier, I is a Chinese soldier. He is also very prestigious in the world." Meng Yibei doubtfully said, "I'm also from Huaxia. When did our country get so recognized by the US Emperor?" "Recently." "Have you heard of the Xinjiang fleet?" Su Ran asked. "Xinjiang fleet?" Meng Yibei nodded, shook his head again, and said in a daze, "I've heard many people mention this term, but no one has ever explained to me what it is." This girl hadn't heard of the Xinjiang fleet before she fell into this swarm. At least it must have been quite before the Sky Brood War. Su Ran suddenly felt that she was a little pitiful, but it was too troublesome to explain this matter, and she was pitiful. But Su Ran didn't have time to explain to her, "It's just a powerful fleet, a violent organization that no one can afford now. I can barely it can be regarded as one of them. So now the old and beautiful people not only dare not do anything to me, but also have to be polite." With that said, Su Ran sat down in the corner, and began to think about how she could borrow US military equipment to contact her Xinjiang fleet without revealing anything. But Meng Yibei is like a curious baby. Of course, it is also possible that she was locked up for more than one day. She was a little scared in her heart, and she just wanted to talk more with people she knew. At this time she asked, "You said that someone would come to pick you up, and you were talking about the Xinjiang fleet, right?" "So that's how it is." Su Ran was thinking about other things in his head, and when he heard the words, he replied casually, "Well, why is this so? It turns out that although you are in that powerful fleet, you are only a pawn, so no one came to find you." "Su Ran, you say it like this, it seems to be true." Meng Yibei couldn't help but worried. "Since this is the case, will the fleet you mentioned really come to you because of the message you sent?" Su Ran was taken aback by the series of questions. He was silent for a long time before he came back to his senses, and said with certainty, "Of course. Although I am, nobody, but you are not. Just put reporting your news will definitely attract attention." Chapter 18 Never Neglect. Hearing these words, Meng Yibei's heart couldn't help but twitch slightly, and he thought, "Isn't this going to take me back and slice it?" But after all, she didn't say such childish words. She just sat in the corner, and didn't speak any more. Su Ran also fell silent, Trying to figure out how to contact the Zinging fleet. It is unrealistic to ask the US military directly to contact its own fleet. The US military must know that its fleet went into the sky and entered the Earth. 3 days ago, it chased and killed an enemy ship capable of interstellar navigation. The captain of such a black tech fleet came here alone, and kept claiming that there were many fleets behind him, but in the end he had to use US military equipment to contact his fleet. Isn't this nonsense? All of a sudden it will be revealed. What can I do? Sue Ran fell into deep thought, and her thoughts gradually began to drift. What he didn't know was that at this moment, in a meeting room of an underground defense center in San Diego, a grand meeting was taking place that gathered high-level officials from all walks of life in San Diego. They had a heated discussion about Sue Ran's arrival. Most of the people were trembling, for fear that a main artillery strike would wipe out the entire San Diego. A rear admiral who hadn't gone to sea for several months even said, "I think we must not act rashly." You think, now that the swarm has been defeated by the fleet, what is he doing here? He is definitely going to conquer the world. Throughout the resume of this commander, it is written entirely with the results of the battle. The Battle of Ice City, the Battle of the Sky Brood, the Battle of Sword and Virtue, and the thousands of miles of raids in the Pacific Ocean. 3 days ago, it was almost like being chased by the swarm's buttocks. They are broken. What kind of character is this? This is a war madman. In my opinion, he is similar to the character who wrote Mein Kampf. Such a character suddenly appeared here, seemingly for an Asian. The awakened one is here, but I don't think that's the case. He must have a deep strategic purpose. He may even want to dominate the world, and he is looking for a reason to attack us, the world's most powerful country. His words were logical, and he immediately won the support and firm approval of the vast majority of anti-war factions. They all felt that no provocation or force action should be taken against Sue Ran now, and that observation, vigilance and politeness are the most important thing. Pivotal. Of course, there are also many people who think that there is no fleet behind Sue Ran, but because there is no absolute evidence to prove this point, those who hold such thoughts have not been able to get a say. After all, it was actually because Sue Ran was not a bug, although various rumors claim that Sue Ran is an extraterrestrial creature. Judging from the current situation, his behavior and ideas are closer to human beings. The concept of Day 1 Sue Ran's arrival was like a boulder falling from a calm lake. The news had even been passed to the Ministry of National Defense. One stone caused 1,000 waves. Everyone was speculating that such a big man appeared at this juncture. Here's what to do. Facing a group of staff, Mr. Leader, who was far away in Washington, raised a serious question that made everyone think deeply. Now, after the founder of the Zinging fleet and a war madman frightened our San Diego garrison, not only has he not left now, but he has been sitting alone in the presidential suite in San Diego for several hours, and he has no intention of leaving now, and his fleet has been in the fog and has not shown his face. You tell me, what is he doing? What do you want to do? All the staff in front of him looked at each other in blank dismay. Maybe everyone had their own guesses in their hearts, but no one dared to really say so. The atmosphere became very heavy and depressing. The Mr. Leader watched this scene and sighed silently in his heart. Although the Zinging fleet defeated the swarm, he found himself unhappy because I don't know when it started. They used to be the most powerful country in the world, but now they have become so weak. In the past, they were the ones who threatened others militarily. Why is it their turn to be threatened by others now? As the time passed by like this, Sue Ran really thought of a way, but he didn't rush to implement it. Instead, he came out and asked for a meal. When Sue Ran stood in front of Angus and said, "I want to eat McDonald's," without shame, he clearly saw that the captain of the special operations team turned green afterwards. Sue Ran went back to her room and continued to be bored. This move has stirred up countless thoughts. The Washington side even immediately set up a psychological investigation team to study and analyze the real purpose behind the actions of the commander. The war madman Sue Ran and this group of experts is not a cover. They quickly came up with an accurate analysis result. Sue Ran intends to use this to make the United States relax its vigilance. When this news came out, countless people's faces changed instantly, and countless terrifying associations arose, and they felt more and more that this war madman appeared here at this juncture to fight a war. The leader even personally issued an order: San Diego should pay attention. Sue Ran is probably here to find an opportunity and reason for the war. You must not neglect, let alone let him take advantage of it, unless it is a last resort. We should start a war with the Zinging fleet. Of course, this purpose is only a preliminary speculation. It is not clear what Sue Ran's real intention is now. Report, joint analysis. Therefore, throughout the whole night, The task force in San Diego and the task force in Washington stayed up all night, studying an extremely profound problem: what is the purpose of Mr. Suran, the founder of the Xinjiang fleet, a war madman who has won many battles? However, for the whole night that followed, Suran didn't go out, even the curtains were drawn, so there was no news to upload, and no one knew what the war madman was doing in the presidential suite. As a result, the analysis of these special groups gradually turned into staring eyes in the true sense. Whoever stayed up late and stayed up longer was the group that worked the hardest. In fact, Suran didn't do anything else that night. His plan was half-determined, but he still had to wait. He had nothing else to do, so he chatted with Meng Yibei, who was under the same roof. Chapter 19: Fragments of Memory. This time, given the opportunity, Suran had a good chat with a special woman. What Suran was more concerned about was her memory, whether it was the memory before she was caught or the memory after she was caught. It didn't matter. The appearance of Meng Yibei made Suran's alarm bell ring. A hidden energy killer of this strength is not enough to fear. Although the fall of the Yunchang is inseparable from Meng Yibei, it is also because the Yunchang was hit hard before, otherwise she would not have boarded the ship at all. Opportunity, and there is no way to exert combat power. Of course, it was not Meng Yibei who controlled this body at that time. However, if there are hundreds or even thousands of similar swarm combat weapons, it will not be a simple matter. However, it may be because my level was too low in the previous life. Even when I was dying 3 years later, although I heard that the swarm was studying humans, I didn't seem to have heard of these dark energy killers. Therefore, Suran had to figure out these things. Meng Yibei's performance was quite cooperative, probably because of the so-called shared wheel in WoW. Her attitude towards Suran was pretty good. She tried her best to think about it, shook her head, and said, about the experiment itself, I can remember it. Things are limited. But I didn't talk much last night, and I recalled a lot of things. Before this, Suran had inquired and understood that although Meng Yibei had been brought here for a long time, her own abilities were still recovering. Therefore, unless Angus wanted to, if he wanted to turn his face, he didn't dare to do anything. After all, Angus had confirmed in advance that Meng Yibei's dark energy level had surpassed the limit of human beings, and he was a moving humanoid weapon. In this case, Meng Yibei himself was unwilling to say anything, and Angus was also very difficult to deal with. And because of this, apart from being restricted in personal freedom, Meng Yibei did not receive any unfair treatment. Suran was silent for a while, and said, then can you tell me what you think of? Looking at Suran, Meng Yibei hesitated for a moment, and for a moment, she wanted to tell what she had almost lost control, but she held back, and said quietly, that's a long story. Meng Yibei's memory is fragmented. She is from Suzhou. After the apocalypse, she accidentally awakened the so-called supernatural ability and became an awakened person. This should have meant that she completely got rid of the status of an ordinary survivor and could obtain more resources than others, but she did not expect that. This is just the beginning of misfortune and disaster. At the very beginning, she and a group of 20 or so awakened people were assigned to a team of awakened people. Meng Yibei's temper at that time was still timid and fearful. Fortunately, she met a good master in the team. Her name is Xiao Kingxun. She is 10 years older than me. She said that before the end of the world, she was a white-collar worker with an annual salary of several million. The most important thing. Speaking of Xiao Kingxun, Meng Yibei's expression was a little gloomy. I don't know what she was like before, but in my memory she is gentle and quiet, just like my sister. Xiao Kingxun taught Meng Yibei many principles, survival skills, and dark energy control skills. In a short period of time, Meng Yibei grew up. At that time, they were located in a place called Guang Survivor Base in Suzhou. They were stationed with the army and participated in many wars later. However, things changed. Here come the bugs. It was a new type of war insect that Meng Yibei had never seen before, covering the sky and the sun. From Meng Yibei's description, Suran realized that it was the attack group of Skywatchers and Whalers. The Guang Survivor Base is only a medium-sized survivor base, not too large, and thus avoided many dangers, but this time it was not so lucky for them. This batch of Skywatchers and Whalers attack groups is absolutely an unrivaled and destructive force. Moreover, at that stage, it was only July and August, and Suran was still spinning around in the Ice City. Most of the swarm's combat power was basic black beetles and migratory locusts. The purpose of this batch of howler attack swarms appeared there was of course not annihilating a survivor of this size. They are aimed at the awakened. At that stage, It was also the outbreak period of the large-scale awakening of the awakened people around the world. Human beings have become the hope of bugs to open the dark energy field. They want to find the key to open a new field from human beings. Unfortunately, Meng Yibei and the others became the target at that time. The military quickly understood what the goal of the swarm was. Guangzhou was destroyed, but their awakened squad was fled all the way by the protectors. It was the darkest day in Meng Yibei's life. The swarms of insects chased them everywhere, while they fled everywhere. When they ran out of food, they ate grass and bark. People die every day. The soldiers who fought with them had long since died, and they could escape all the way because the bugs wanted to catch the living awakened ones. But the good times didn't last long. No one can run away all the time. At that time, the surrounding area was almost completely controlled by the swarm, and their mere 20 or so people were unable to break through the blockade of the swarm, so they could only circle around like headless flies in a smaller and smaller encirclement, waiting for the arrival of the last moment. Gradually, they couldn't hide anymore, and someone was caught. Those caught were taken all the way up the whalers, and they were never seen again. Meng Yibei has been on the run, living a life where neither humans nor ghosts exist, until one day, they ushered in the end. That day was the day Xiao Kingsun died. Maybe it was a premonition. In the early morning, before dawn, she pulled me and talked a lot. Tell me, let me be a hard-working, strong and brave person, try to live hard, never give up hope. Meng Yibei turned her head to look out of the window, but noticed that the window was blocked by curtains. She smiled a little lonely, and said, then the insects came, and there were shadows in the bushes. She stayed behind to make a way for us that day. She was the first ray of light in the morning. Oh, I haven't told you about her ability yet, have I? She is a level 4 awakener with great strength. The ability is to control her own biological discharge. There is almost no limit to this ability. The only limit is the quality and substance of the creature itself. That day, I saw the most beautiful lightning. She released her life in that dark woodland. The electric light spread all over the bushes and reached the sky. The space was filled with high-temperature electric charges, like a new rising sun. And people couldn't even look directly at it. Do you believe that human beings can have such power? That is the miracle of dark energy, and it is also the miracle of life. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.